episode 71 of Strange Brow Radio. I am again your host, Tobe Johnson. Today we are talking to pioneer, researcher, author, and discoverer of quantum Bigfoot language, Ron Morehead. And he couldn't have done it without Scott Nelson, ex-Navy crypto-linguist. We had a conference with them, and some of you were there. But for those who weren't, I felt like, well, why belabor the editing of the video? Let's just get right into the topic, the discussion at hand, and talk quantum Bigfoot language. So 24 hours after our webinar, we are going to air the audio. Less than 24 hours old. So, quantum Bigfoot language today. Thank you again to our sponsor, Feral by Aaron at Etsy.com. Go to the Etsy store and type in Feral by Aaron, E-R-Y-N, Alchemy Sound Tools at Feral by Aaron at Etsy.com. All right, let me tell you about these guys. We'll be right back. Scott Nelson, Ron Morehead, two names synonymous with language and Sasquatch. Now Ron fully immersed, seeing how his last book, Quantum Bigfoot, redefined how we should look at this mystery. And Scott Nelson along for the ride. But it doesn't just stop at Scott's lens of looking at language as an ex-Navy crypto-linguist. The reason that I'm playing you this here so quickly out of the gate is because it's been 10 years since these two met. It's been 10 years since Scott has released the Sasquatch Phonetic Alphabet, or the SPA, to further look into the subject matter of understanding that A, Sasquatch speaks and it has a language. And where there's language, there's culture. And where there's culture, there is spirit. And we go down some incredible rabbit holes. Now, there is going to be a release of this video here, and you still want to get a hold of this video because there are visual aids that go along with this. Ron did a presentation, for crying out loud. So did Scott. And the back and forth is worth looking at, including the release of this SPA. So the visual aid that goes along with this, I'm going to go ahead and release that with or without the video, splicing it together. It needs to be back out into the public eye. And with all the BS going on about the, well, you've seen it, the back and forth between boys arguing over Bluff Creek footage again. What a bunch of crap. Oh my God. Both sides, dear Lord. Anyway, these guys are so above the the fray with all that back and forth there. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this conversation. This is where a mystery still lays. Ron still is the only one with the complex morpheme stream, which is the back and forth of a sentence between two beings or more. And so I look forward to getting this out there for you. I planned on waiting a little bit and putting the whole video out. And then, like I said, the video will be available. Now, it will be, this is like a 2-hour webinar that we did, a little something that we call quarantine webinars, right? Well, we're all in quarantine. And so if you go to patreon.com, that's where I'm putting all my webinars. And for as little as $3 a month, you can just try out like a bunch of stuff for $3 and then quit it. You don't have to subscribe for more than $3 a month and just drop it. And then Ron Morehead will have this as well at ronmorehead.com. So if you have sounds, if you want those sounds to be looked at and you feel like Scott Nelson is your man, we talk about a way for you to send those sounds off to get analyzed by Scott, who's got an incredible ear, some might say a God-given gift of mimicry when it comes to foreign languages, including Sasquatchanese, which is the ultimate foreign language. So, Ron Morehead of Quantum Bigfoot, researcher from the High Sierra, Scott Nelson, 20 years in the Navy as a enlisted ex-naval crypto-linguist. And Scott's got quite the war stories too, but that's for another time. So, without further ado, from their mutual establishments, we give you Quantum Bigfoot Language. All right, let's get started here. Out of the gate, everybody knows who we have on screen, I hope, but we'll introduce them nonetheless. Ron Morehead, Bigfoot researcher, entrepreneur, author of several books, including Quantum Bigfoot, which is where we're headed today, including Quantum Bigfoot Language. Thanks for joining us, Ron.
Thanks for having me, Scott. Toby.
Scott, you can call me Scotty. And Scott Nelson, 20 years a teacher at Wentworth College prior to his time, and now teaching at Missouri Military Academy, instructor of language and philosophy. He also is the author of the Sasquatch Phonetic Alphabet. Hello, Scott.
Hello. How are you?
Right.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad we put this together here. Now, we've got a lot that we can get through and talk about within the time that we have it here. And I want you guys to feel comfortable because this is going to go down in the digital record for us. We're recording live and we're going to keep track of this here. So you guys don't do a whole lot of conferences directly together. Ron, would it be fair to say that you do more conferences alone without Scott?
Yeah.
Okay.
To be fair.
So this is a good opportunity for you guys to catch up and clear the air because there's a lot going on in the community still, even while we're all in this position of quarantine. But to let the audience know, Ron does have a presentation that we're going to start off with. But before we do that, I just want you guys to tell the audience a little bit about yourself here. Maybe just give each of you give 5 minutes of your background to the audience, and then we'll move forward from there.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and start, Scott?
Okay. The first thing I like to tell everyone when I present my study is that I'm not a Bigfoot guy. I never was a Bigfoot guy. I mean, I grew up in the Rocky Mountains with all kinds of stories. I had Native American friends who had really crazy stories. I always thought that they were just superstitions. So I never was a Bigfoot guy. I'm just a language guy. But one day I had my son was up in my classroom at Wentworth College because he didn't have class. He didn't have school that day. And he had a project to do for school. And this is when Google was brand new to me anyway. And I had my computer open. I said, so what do you want to do? He was supposed to write a paper. And he was a 12-year-old boy. So, of course, all 12-year-old boys want to write a paper on either the Loch Ness Monster, UFOs, or Bigfoot. I said, well, pick one. So he says, okay, Bigfoot. So I started Googling Bigfoot. And in the middle of that, he says, Dad, what do you think Bigfoots sound like? And I just remembered some B-grade movie from the 70s, and I let out some little, ow, goofy sound. And Stephen says, Dad, that's not what Bigfoots sound like. And I said, okay, well, let's Google it. So I literally Googled Bigfoot sounds. And the first thing it brought me up to, and I don't know if Ron's website was called that at the time, but what it took me to was the BFRO, to a couple of these little clips of what they called the samurai chatter. And I listened to that, a couple of those, and I was dumbfounded because I knew immediately what I was hearing. And my son, I was so silent and engrossed in it that my son said, Dad, what's wrong with you? And the rest is history, really. Because at that moment, that was the moment immediately that I knew those three things, is that I was not hearing a human being, that's for sure. And I knew that from professional experience of 20 years of listening to the human voice on tape. It was not a human being, yet it was speaking a language. And the third thing is I knew it was not fake. Stephen says, Dad, how do you know that's a language? It sounds like apes fighting to me. And I said, well, son, we got to get a hold of those tapes and slow it down like Dad used to do in the Navy. And after several days of detective work, I was able to find Ron. And that's complicated my life, should we say. Ron?
Ditto. Actually, my history is going to be in the first beginning of the PowerPoint program I got for everybody. I made it especially just for this. And this has been with me since 71, so I was 29 years old then. And it kind of tags on you and stays there, especially when you've had the experience that me and the other guys had up at that Sierra camp. But so anyway, Scott and I became friends after that. He came out and interviewed actually Al Berry and myself, an investigative reporter that took up. He wanted to find the context, I think, of the sounds. We gave him copies of the original sounds, and he went back and studied them and claimed that there's a complex language by the human definition for language, which I'll get into in my program, and he probably will too. But what does that mean? It means something very special to me, because only humans, according to, I'm going to get my program without even getting into it here, but according to Dr. Philip Lieberman in 1968, he said only humans have the capability with the hyoid bone and the tongue and the way the larynx, all of it fits together into the nerves, into the brain, to have sapient speech like we have, like we're having right now. And that's kind of compelling, because really only humans are supposed to have that. So it kind of sways me into thinking, especially with all the reports people I've interviewed, they said they have a very human look to them. So I think they're part human, and that's where I'll go with this. But a lot of people want to think they're just an ape in the woods, and that's okay if they want to think that way. They might be right. Maybe some of them are. But what we dealt with in the Sierra Nevada mountains was more than just an ape in the woods. I mean, there was some strangeness went on around them.
Okay, so let's make this abundantly clear that we're going to talk a little bit about that strangeness too, and how it may fit into your journey along the way. Really, at this point, we have nothing to lose. We've talked about so much of the behavior, talked about how they look physically, how they interact, but there's all this other stuff that goes way deeper than that. And you've been privy to it. You've talked about it openly with David Paulides and his last Missing 401 documentary. And from what I could tell with Scott, you're no stranger to some of the weirdness as well, because there's some stories, really cool stories, that I want to get out of you as we go along. But let's not belabor this moment here. Anybody in the audience who wants to chime in, feel like you can do so. But Ron, I'd like for you to begin your presentation here. And Scott, along the way, feel like you can join in on the conversation with Ron regarding what he's about to share. But unless you guys have anything else you want to add, let's get started.
Okay, you ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right.
It's all on you right now. I'm going to mute myself while you do this.
Well, I don't know why that's up there like that, but anyway, let me get into my...
Yeah. I don't know what you did, Toby, but we're seeing everything but what we're supposed to be, I think.
Well, wait, it takes me a minute, Scott. I'm not as fast as I used to be.
Right, Scott, you'll see his presentation here shoot up in a second.
Oh, okay.
Well, there's one. Any comments on that? Okay.
Yep.
Well, Well, I'm sure everybody recognized that. That's the Patterson film from 1967. It's been thoroughly studied, second only to the Kennedy assassination. Here's my situation: the Sierra Sounds. All these experts have chimed in here, and Scott being one of them. But Dr. Curlin's report is a professor of electrical engineering at the University of Wyoming, and his 1978 study established the credibility of the original tapes. There was no manipulation. It was within, below, and above the average human range. And you got that. He's a professor. He's written over 200 papers. He was renowned, and he's retired now. But that seems to be dropped in all this. I doubt if a lot of people have even read the book where he wrote and published by the University of British Columbia, UBC Press in 1980, when he presented his findings of these sounds at that seminar, that symposium that was up there. And yet it's just kind of overlooked by so much academia. Then you've got the 1996 when the human sound expert, Nancy Logan, she's a court-certified interpreter of several languages. She was at that time one of only 10 in the whole state of California that was qualified to listen to different languages and interpret them. And she challenges anyone to be able to duplicate it. She says, and I'll give her a little spiel here in a minute, but you can't duplicate this with our human vocal mechanism. And you've got Scott, who we just heard from a minute. 2008, he retired Navy crypto-linguist, totally vetted, transcribed a complex language, verified these beings have a language by the human definition, which is very important. Another little element, which is not verified by academia, but is Thinker Thunker. He claims that there's 5 octaves in one tone. And if that's correct, and I'm trying to get some kind of professor someplace to verify this, I've got a couple looking at it maybe if they don't get scared. And that's what they do, is they get scared of taking on a subject like this. But if that proves out, that should be a smoking gun. I mean, with all this other stuff, you've always got these experts here. And you got thousands of eyewitnesses, but most of them are ridiculed by media, by the media and academia both. But what is it? What is an expert? It's one who, with the special skill or knowledge representing the mastery of a particular subject. I gotta say, Professor Kern's an expert, Nancy Logan's an expert, Scott Nelson's an expert. So, why is it that information is mostly ignored by mainstream science? Could they have a fixed paradigm? That's exactly what I think it is. Either that or it's the funding they won't get if they take on a subject matter like this. So, anyway, we got these experts that's already chimed in on these sounds, and it's really incredible. But when you get trying to send this to other people, here's a good one. They kind of ridicule it still. Science changes one funeral at a time. Anybody like that one? It's Max Planck. He's a Nobel Prize winner for quantum physics in 1918. He won that Nobel Prize for quantum physics. So people think quantum physics is something out there in woo-woo land. Well, I hope to tell you it's something different, because it's how everything in the universe actually works. But this is when it began for me. It was in 1971. That's when I first heard their chatter. That's when I began researching giants. And that's a footprint, the first print I ever saw up there, 1971. Anybody got a question, just jump in and break me up, because I'm going to go through this. We took supplies in, and see those barrels there and the mules, and that was 1972. And on the trail, and this is a recording we captured. By the way, all these recordings are captured at the same spot in the Sierra Nevada Mountains, same camp. But it's a wilderness area. The following clip was provided by David Pilates. 2018, he's the first professional filming that ever allowed in the Sierra camp that ever took there. And it took a little bit of persuading to get me to let somebody go in there. Scott actually came out and seen me, I think specifically to try to get me to talk to David about allowing him to go in, because he wanted to film it, because he knew the history of it and he thought it should be documented. Did I say that right, Scott?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, good. Just needed to know if I could hear you. Anyway, this is the trip in. It's only 1 minute long, the trip, but it's about a 5-6 hour trip in. So let's watch it.
That's okay, I'll put in. It's a nice easy
And just so people can get some idea, we're not that far outside of Yosemite.
We're not far at all. No, I tell people we're between Yosemite and Tahoe, and that's where we are. if you leave at 6,000 feet elevation, you hike into close to 10,000 feet before you start dropping back into up and down. The whole topography up here changes every year. You don't know what to expect. You don't know what log's going to cross the trail that you have to work your way around to get here. There's really no good trails to get here. And if you don't know where it's at, you'll never find it. It's just one of those places. A lot of people have seen this before, but I'm just going to hurry through some of this and then when I get into the, well, it's all good stuff, I think. Anyway, I've been to a lot of places researching this phenomenon. And I went into Russia, Siberia, Bolivia, Mexico, Peru, a couple times there too. But an effective researcher does not selectively find reports that fit his or her ideas, does not discredit others, keeps an open mind, listens, and should never be tethered by an ego. That's what I think makes us human. Egos make us human, so I think it's kind of important to watch for that in this whole field because it seems like there's a competition going on, and I don't. Well, that was Warren Johnson. That was one of the first interactions we had. That was a whistle, which I think Scott has Scott has all this stuff, but the whistle is done through the vocal mechanism, not through the lips like we do. We whistle through our lips, and these things whistle through the vocal cords. And they have a very expanded vocal mechanism, more so than humans. And we don't actually know what many of these hominids represent. What we do know is that the Sierra Bigfoot, ones we record up there, have a complex language. And what is it about language that makes it so important? It's not a whoop, it's not a yell, it's not a scream. Everything communicates with some type of noise or something, frequency. But it's sapient talk, that's what language is. And a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But mimicking is not language. I had somebody say, well, well, that wasn't a minor bird, and it wasn't a leery bird either. I had somebody say, well, birds can mimic. Were these things mimicking? No, they were not mimicking, in my opinion, and I think Scott will verify that, but they were actually talking to each other. And that's kind of what Albert Ostman talked about in this book here. This is when I was exploring Toba Inlet. It was Albert Ostman's story of 1924. I was up there, that's Peter Byrne on the right, Al Berry on the left, when we went into Toba Inlet. That's a little map up there of where Ostman said he was taken from and kidnapped, held 6 days. But what he said in that was they chattered amongst themselves. And that's in this book with John Green. And anyway, I thought that's kind of interesting because you hear people saying they were chattering, like they think there's people out there talking somewhere. Well, they are, but what are they? They're not like us, whatever they are.
Quick question here, and this is going to maybe interrupt your flow here, but I think there needs to be more questions here as we go along, so I'm just going to ask them. In regards to your story, Ron, the people on here, I assume a lot of them already know it, so they've come locked and loaded with questions. The first one was, in your area at the Sierra Camp, did you ever expand out to other areas to study it, 10 miles out, maybe mark a radius from the center of camp and work outside of it?
Yeah, yes, we did quite a bit. Yeah, well, the answer is yes, we did. We was looking for signs. We have found signs out away from camp. I interviewed a guy last year I think it was, who hunts about 15 miles as crow flies from where our camp is. And a very credible guy, and sounding very credible, a firefighter. And he'd been hunting that way, and he'd been experiencing the Bigfoot phenomenon for several years, but he thought it's time to get a hold of somebody. So he got a hold of me, but he also said that this last time when he had an encounter, he saw a UFO hovering over this mountain and a Bigfoot at the same time. So I started looking into that connection, and so I've looked into that for some time now, but I do believe there's a connection there with an alien component to it, and of course that's another story too. But yeah, we did expand out, and we have found things. One time I was out a few miles away with Alberry. We took our horses into a little lake that I'd never been to before. It was right around, it was across the canyon, way across the canyon from where our camp is, a couple of canyons actually. I thought, well, what the heck, I'll get out here and do a couple of yells. I used to have a big yelling Bigfoot voice. I got out there and started doing some yelling. Went back and sat down by the fire where Al was, and all of a sudden, here it comes. Big chatter. Oh, wow, I got their attention. It surprised me. I didn't think it would, but it did. So I ran over there with my camera right quick. I'm standing over there by the edge of the cliff where the sound came from, and that was it. No picture, no nothing after that.
Just a quick note here, Ron. Can you turn down the audio just a hair on your end with the music, just so we can hear you a little bit better?
That shouldn't even
turn the volume down just a little bit on your. I don't know if that's a possibility.
Let's see if it goes to the next one. Still there?
Okay. That's all right. I just wanted to make sure that they could hear you.
That. I'm not sure where I started that.
Well, let's go back to the Jane Goodall letter here and see if we can do it without the audio so big. Okay, there we go. The other question along the way, let me go back here. This may be one for you to chime in onto as well, Scott, regarding what we just heard prior to that, the sound file that Ron played with the Sierra sounds. Has anybody come close to recording what Ron has recorded all those years?
No. Over the years, I've received dozens, over 100 little snippets and clips of language from researchers, and they fall into several categories. Most of them are just fake. Most of them, and some of them are obviously attempts by people to trick me up. In other words, send me something fake and see if I'll say that it's real. Then another huge block of them that I've received are simply just other animals or just other sounds in the forest that I can't say that they're not the same being as the Sierra being, but I can't say that they are.
Okay.
Because they might fall within the parameters of a human voice, for instance. And I've had 3 or 4 out of all of them that I believe could be the same type of being as the Sierra being.
Okay. That's what I wanted to ask here. Okay, Ron, sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
It's okay. This is a letter I wrote to Jane Goodall. She kindly replied in her own handwriting, so I saved it, and kind of glad I did. She's an open-minded person. Thought I'd say that. Here's a letter that we wrote about the language or the chattering amongst themselves to Ivan Sanderson, and that was 1971, the winter of 71, when you can't get into the camp any longer in the snow. And Ivan Sanderson, unbeknownst to us, sent it to Peter Byrne. He's saying it very blatantly, it's got to be a hoax because they're just an ape in the woods, right? That's all people thought they were. It's all we thought they were too, but there was chattering, and we didn't realize the significance of language at that time. But it was a 23-page handwritten letter to Ivan Sanderson, sent it to Peter Byrne. By the way, that's Warren Johnson. He's the guy you heard whistling back and forth with the Bigfoot that was whistling, and that's Alberry on his right. But anyway, Well, that's a picture of Al Berry. We ended up taking him into camp in 1972, and he recorded some sounds and was trying to find the hoax that Peter Byrne thought it was a hoax. Al Berry thought it was a hoax. We didn't know these guys think it was a hoax because we knew what was going on up there. We thought we did. And anyway, I like this little statement. Credible evidence can often be ignored if it doesn't fit within predetermined paradigms. So many people have made up their mind what these things have to be, and they don't open their mind up to the bigger bubble that's going on around the universe instead of the one that's just on the earth here. I just thought of that statement, by the way. Here's a picture of Al Berry and Peter Byrne. That was Peter Byrne's first trip up into camp. Nothing happened when they were up there, which is not surprising. These things stay ahead of you. But again, these guys, and according to we too, thought they're just a clever ape in the woods. Everybody wants to know what all these books are about here I got on the sides. Just ask me and I'll tell you. No questions?
We do have a question here. Let's
I just want to fill up the white space.
Can you hear me, Ron?
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question here. And we'll have you chime in here, Scott, as well. This is from David Drageson. After studying the pathology and audiology, shouldn't one be able to write the samurai chatter?
That's what I have done. I have transcribed.
Okay.
I have transcribed the samurai chatter. I have 75 pages of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not published.
Is that something that can be published and peer-reviewed and put out? And
yes, absolutely, it will be published. For a long time, we were waiting for some kind of corroborating evidence, but a well-known academic fellow researcher, made the point to me once. He said, "You've already got corroborating evidence."
Mm-hmm.
Because you got it in 2 different years, 2 different times.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something we've been working toward. But for a long time, that's why when we presented our study,
mm-hmm.
the first thing that we would do, and the last thing we would do, is ask all of the field researchers out there to send me any kind of tapes at all that they thought could have any kind of chatter or even coyotes fighting, because that's what it sounds like to the average ear. And that's what we did over the first few years, to just collect so many different audio clips from people sending us everything.
And there was an interesting quote yesterday for people that weren't here for the elongated skull conversation that Ron was a part of. One of the questions was about academics not taking the research seriously, mm-hmm. or just plain on pushing the evidence aside. But Brian Forster brought up a good point that if you got to change the culture first, the academics will follow. You don't need their approval. You have to get to your audience. And that's what we hope to do here. I mean, academics may be tuning in. I hope they are. But all in all, it takes the people in the audience to push the culture here. Someone else wrote, real quick, there's a book down here, Ron, in the lower left-hand corner called Ishi. Is that right?
Ishi.
Yeah, someone said they really appreciate you putting that up.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's a pretty interesting story. Anyway, I don't know if you want me to read it to you or not.
No, one more question.
He was east of Chico in California, in the mountains there, and he was one of the last remaining of the tribe.
Keith Luntz has a question for you too, Ron, as we're going forward here. Do you think Bigfoot can mimic animals? And if so, how has this been witnessed? How has this been observed? Do you believe they can mimic owls in particular?
Yes. Certainly. They have such an expanded vocal mechanism compared to ours anyway. I think they can make any sound they want to. And there was one town he may be referring to, the one I've talked about, and that's when my daughter Rhonda and I were at camp, just the 2 of us, and I heard what I thought was an owl up the canyon a little ways, and behind those birch trees, Scott, right up there by those rocks. And I started turning my little recorder, my handheld recorder on, and the speaker switch was on, made a squeal, and that owl sound turned into a Bigfoot chatter. And that told me right there, well, they sound like an owl. But what gives them away a lot, now it was up the canyons that could have, it was really loud, I thought, for an owl, but then it could have been echoing down the canyon a little bit. So what gives them away is their amplitude. I think they're really huge voices, and it'll jar you when they're next to you and start doing something like that. But yes, they can mimic. I believe they do mimic. It may be a hunting tool, it might be an evasive tool, whatever, but they can do it, in my opinion, and my opinion is good.
That's what counts right now. Okay, next slide, Ron. We're ready.
Okay, this is Alberry, but cognitive dissonance, it's mental conflict that occurs when beliefs or assumptions are contradicted by new information. A lot of people are in that right now, and that was coined by this Pessinger, Leon Pessinger, 1957, that term. But people have made up their mind, and when something else comes to them like this, and that's what Alberry ran into. He had several attempts trying to solicit some unbiased scientist to either credit or discredit the recordings. He didn't care. He just wanted it solved one way or the other, whichever way it was. And it wasn't until he ran into Professor Curlin at the University of Wyoming that he got some good information, that unbiased information, a year-long study, which I'll talk about in a minute. But that wasn't his first. He went all over. He got laughed at a lot of places and made fun of. Her first connection, he thought, well, I'll go right at the top of the realm here. He went to the Syntonics research in New York City. These are people that studied the Nixon Watergate tapes. I'm sure a lot of people remember that. If you're over 20 years old, you might remember it. No, 40 years. How long? Never mind. But they said, just in a quick analysis of it, which they didn't do a full study, but the sounds were spontaneous, taken at the time of the recordings. There was no 60-cycle hum, which would have shown pre-recording or re-recording in a studio. And they were too powerful to have been human-made. And that's Ivy Tybal, president of Syntonic Research, who studied the Nixon tapes. So that was a pretty good hit, but this still wasn't. They recommended they find somebody just like he found Dr. Curlin. Anyway, the complete back and forth of that deal with Tybal is in this book right here, which Alberry co-wrote with Ann Slate. And if you've got that book, you look in Appendix B in the back of it, and he goes through pretty much word by word the conversation he had with Tybal. But this is Curlin's, and anybody's seen my presentation before, I always play this one because it has some pretty unique features in it. We're still talking about language here because that's so important to me that these things have a language. They have to be part human if they got language. At least they got that human DNA in them. I'll let you listen to this, but Curlin's report, you see this box right here. Can you see my mouse?
You bet.
Okay, good. That's the average human range. And this little bit I'm going to play for right here is in Curlin's report, which is in Man Like Monsters on Trial, the UBC Press in British Columbia. You'll hear these sounds here, which represent gur, the gur sound. You hear the sounds here. But look for the sound muitel, this zero here. Little icon in there, that's inside the human range. It sounds very human-like when he says this muitel. You hear this at the end. So I'll play it again if you want me to. Do you hear the muitel? Yeah, that's I think very interesting because that sound human-like is in the human range. However, note they can go outside the human range, above and below, and a whole lot more. If I wants to hear it again, I'll play it again. Okay. Now, there's another professor, Dr. Benson, professor of diagnostic sciences at Texas A&M, who listened to this just a quick listen. Again, he was too busy to do a study. I asked him to, but he wouldn't, just because I wanted somebody else to chime in on it too. He suggested an animal 8 foot 5 inches tall made that sound, and I thought that was kind of interesting. Anyway, all this is in not Vincent's report, but Dr. Curlin's report is in this Men Like Monsters on Trial, which probably could still be obtained by his made in Canada. And there was his whole several-page reports in here. And Nancy Logan, she's a human sound expert, and she's the one that is, of course, certified in California was. And she said, who or whatever made these noises has a voice pitch range that is considerably more flexible than that of Homo sapiens sapiens. It goes much lower and much higher. And I thought that was kind of interesting because it does. I have a speculation. I speculate that could Bigfoot have more than 2 vocal cords, given their very unusual vocal abilities? Don't know. But I suspect they might have, because they can do some really interesting sounds that are outside of what we can even probably hear. Oh, look at that guy.
Hey, before we get to talking about that guy there, a question for both of you here. Next question from Keith. Different languages from different areas. Are there any examples of a different language outside of the Sierras or, out of Sierra proper exhibiting different languages? Ron, Scott?
I can answer that, Ron. We don't have any example outside of the Sierras of anything like this that we could legitimately say is producing utterances of a linguistic nature. We just don't have it. We don't have any recordings. I have not received any recordings outside of the Sierra area that would be evidence of language. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have a language. It just means that people have not been lucky enough to record them.
Also, I think, if I could add something to that, Scott looks for something that's outside the human range also. Correct, Scott?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because if it's outside the human range, that really grabs the attention of people who want to study it, because humans aren't doing it. And so if there's a morphine stream of words, which Scott will get into, I'm sure, but it just suggests, not suggests, but it determines the language. Scott was vetted by the Defense Language Institute. He was a 2-time graduate of this. And, just in case he don't tell you, I'm going to tell you. There's not too many men qualified on this planet that can do what he did. In fact, he says there's only one that he knows of, and that was his instructor. And anyway, I think that was kind of the importance of language and how it relates to Bigfoot research. Okay, kind of giving that away a little bit, but only humans have the vocal tract capable of language. No other primate has this. That's according to Philip Lieberman. He's a linguistic scientist at Brown University. He made that statement in 1968. So that right there throws a lot of academia away, because they say, well, nothing else can do it. And these aren't humans, so they've got their mind made up. All community sounds are vibrations and frequencies, but cognitive vibes represent a higher level of consciousness. I like that one. Language requires a special connection to the hyoid bone. It works in unison with the larynx and the tongue. Only humans have this, according to Dr. Lieberman. But I got to tell you, Bigfoot has it. Sound waves, when amplified to a high enough frequency, would turn into visible light. That's science. Now, that's kind of unusual for most people to handle, but because there are sounds, if they can get high enough, they will go out of frequency and into light. That's kind of interesting, I think. Anybody else think that's interesting? Raise your hand.
Yeah, there's some hands raised here. There's a question here from Jay. How close do you think they got to the microphones at the Sierra camp? Was there any examples of them actually touching the mic head, flipping the tape recorder around, things like that?
No, there wasn't. No evidence. On my mics, what I had, of course, I lost my tapes in a house fire, unfortunately, because they were primo. I had the best sound equipment you could get and still carry it in a mule with battery-controlled cassette. Stereo, 2 microphones out each side of the shelter sticking out. there's times when I could listen to them walking right outside the shelter. You hear the sound going around in stereo. And I got one of those sounds between Al Berry's tapes where they make a sound and then over here, all of a sudden, a little bit of silence and you hear another sound over here. Well, I amplified that up really high in my SoundForge program, and I could hear the steps going from one place to another. I thought that was pretty cool. But they were within, oh gosh, sometimes just a few feet of our shelter. Now, some of these recordings I'm playing are from Al Berry's recordings because he had very clear ones, and there's the ones that were sent off to Curlin to study. And his microphone that night of that recording was remoted about 40 feet up from our shelter on a little pine tree, and it was wired. Of course, didn't have wireless in those days. And anyway, the stereo mic that he had was turned vertical. So we found out in the studio when I was publishing or presenting this in a studio that the mic was vertical instead of horizontal, and that's why we didn't get a sound. We couldn't tell where it was coming from later. If we had known that, we could have done something different, but that's how we found out it was mounted vertically on that tree. Let's get into infrasound and ultrasound unless somebody has a question, because there's times when I think we were affected by infrasound up there. And it does affect humans. This is science. It's not some woo something. But it's below the human ability to hear, and it will affect us. It was used in the Second World War by Hitler, actually, to control crowds. But it's a sound that elephants use. It's a sound that large tigers use. Giraffes use it. There's a whole institute that studies infrasound and how infrasound is transfused, because it goes right through things. It'll travel for miles, and that's how animals can connect with each other when they're a long way apart. An ultrasound, though, it's higher. That's what your dog whistles are and all that stuff. It's also a lot of medical devices are used in ultrasound. The human frequency is between 20 and 20,000 hertz. And you see the little graph at the bottom down there. You see the blue. That's where we are, right there. And then you get on all the way up into here, and all kinds of sounds that we don't hear, but we can be affected by them. Same with our vision, which I won't get into that because this is about sound today, how important I think language is. Why is it important in Bigfoot research? Because the more you understand, the easier it is to understand more. I thought that was kind of cute. Anyway, that's me. And yesterday, come on, that's further along than yesterday. That was 1972. And that's my sagittal crest on top of that hat. Keeps the heat in. The snow, you notice the snow around there. We cast that track. And I'm going to play a couple things. But what is it that makes a language by the human definition of language? According to Scott, and you can talk more about this a little bit, but it's a morpheme stream, words that make up a sapient sentence. That's the answer. I'm going to play two. One is display only. This is kind of some of the first sounds we heard up there, which are a little bit spooky for some people. And then the next one will be language between two of them. And this one represents language. Well, there you are. That's, again, we don't know what they were saying. Scott can't tell you what they were saying, but we do know it was a language that communicating between themselves. We don't know, didn't know at the time, if they was arguing about coming and eating us, or if they was going to just arguing over who's going to get the food we left out, or maybe we were going to be the food. We don't know. Maybe we never will know. But kind of exciting times, that's for sure. And that is see that on my hip right there? That's a big gun. We all have guns, so People say don't take guns with you. I think that's silly. There's all kinds of things out there bother you besides these things, and I'm not sure these things would, but I don't think they're allowed. Really, shouldn't be interfering with us humans.
And Ron, we should mention too the size of that cast. What size the footprint again is that?
That's 19.5 inches.
Right, and you still have that cast in your possession, or
I do. Yeah, it's all packed in styrofoam. I got a copy of it that I'll take around with me.
I have a
That's
quick
got the
question
findings.
too from David Mabane. He wants to know: is there any evidence that they can understand English through studying the language, Scott and Ron? Are they simply answering questions that we couldn't understand with knowing full well what the statements were from Ron?
Well, could I shoot it first, Scott?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, in my book, Quantum Bigfoot, I think they can get into the vibration where your head is, and they can, what some people call mind speak. In quantum language, it's called quantum entanglement. And can they understand what you're saying? They can understand your intent, I think, and what you're trying to put out. I don't know if they know the words, but Scott could address that. Who knows? Until they come in and say, "Ooga ooga, there's a tree," and point to a tree. You don't know that ooga ooga means a tree. So there. Scott, you're up. Your turn.
Well, in the Barry Morehead tapes, there are numerous examples of what we would call cognatic expressions, or words that would fit in the right place to be cognates, meaning words that would be the same in their language as it would be in ours. For instance, the word no. We did a study on the frequency count. Linguists have to do this. We do frequency counts on the morphemes, which means syllables, and the frequency count in human languages, the most frequent morpheme that all human languages speak is the word no. Unfortunately, way more common than the word yes. And the frequency count of these Sierra beings, also the very top morpheme, the most common morpheme of all of the utterances that we captured is no. This gives us some correlation to human languages. There are also a lot of things that that people hear when they listen to the tapes, and they think, "Oh my gosh, that sounds like English. That sounds like they're saying this, whatever." But that gets too close to what we would call pareidolia, which is the thing. It's what humans do mentally when they hear something of a completely random nature. We naturally try to make sense out of it. We try to pick pieces out of it that would make sense to us, and therefore we would naturally hear things that we would equate with English. Now, the interesting thing about that is I have had native speakers from all over the world listen to these tapes, and they all do the same thing. In fact, one of the first people I ever had listen to it was my very good friend Jerry Masuda, native Japanese speaker. And the reason I had him listen to it was because it does sound Japanese. It sounded like the old samurai movies, the old samurai TV series, and because of the very emphatic staccato in which it's uttered. And he found things right away. He said, "Scott, that sounds like a very ancient form of Japanese, but I can't understand a thing. I can't understand a word of it." And I have found that with Persian speakers, with Russian speakers, with Native American speakers. Anyone that listens to it, they can pick out bits and pieces that seem familiar to them. But we know psycholinguistically that is just a natural thing that we humans do. So we have to document those possible cognates, but we can't put much stock into them. However, it would make sense if these creatures are as observant as we think they are, and if their safety depends so much on the avoidance of humans, it would make sense that they would learn as much of our language as possible. And we have to face it. How long has English been the dominant language on this continent? 400 years, over 400 years. How long before that? How long was the Spanish language dominant on this continent? 500 years. And then we have to think about, the Native American languages. And we can't pick one out. There are over 600 different Native American languages. So it'd be very, very difficult to say, hey, here's some Cherokee words, here's some Shoshone words. But it would make sense that these beings would make every effort to learn as much of our language as they could.
Awesome answer. Real quick here, too, regarding looking into old languages, Scott, is there any evidence that these words are showing up, or these phrases, these phonemes or cognates showing up in what are considered dead languages, like Sumerian or anything like that?
I have, no. But I have to qualify that, because there's an ancient language that I speak, and I've spoken out there with Ron many times, the Avestan language. And I can give you a taste of it. Well, this is Persian. But there's Hashem Vohu Veheshtamasti Ushta Astu Ushta Chmo Yatashoy Vahishtoashim. I have taken these very, very ancient languages, and I will go up when we're up there. I'll go out on a rock, on one of these tall rocks, where we think that many of these articulations were coming from. I'll stand up on top of those and shout these out in every language that I can think of, every language that I know: Russian, Spanish, Persian, English. I'll sing old sea ditties, from my Navy days. But, and we've tried everything, and once in a while we'll get a little bit of a response, but nothing that we could call linguistic.
The Navy sea ditties are usually not PG rated, so I wonder what kind of responses you're getting. Okay, go ahead, Ron.
Okay, this is 3 years after our initial contact. Excuse me, at this year camp. That's me on the left again with Lewis Johnson and Bill McDowell. And Scott seems to think that they slowed the vocalizations down on this tape to communicate. Okay, well, that was a little fun time I had that night, 74. Having language by the human definition implies sapience. Only humans are supposed to be Homo sapiens sapiens, right? Sapiens attributed to humans only. I think this is significant because it should tell some of these would-be researchers out there that they're not looking for just an apron around the woods. And how come they're not finding them? I got that in my quantum book also. Here's a quote by Dr. Edgar Mitchell. There's no unnatural or supernatural phenomena, only very large gaps in our knowledge of what is natural. We should strive to fill those gaps of ignorance. I encourage everybody to memorize that one. Because really, I don't call anything paranormal or woo-woo or nothing. It's just quantum science. Oh, there's a good picture, Scott. Recognize that horse, Scott?
Oh, boy, I remember that day.
Yeah, that was quite a day, wasn't it?
That was a difficult day.
For me.
For you.
That was a day I think I broke a rib or something, couldn't get off the mountain very well. And Scott nursed me back to the camp where my daughter was. And,
no, he's playing it down. I saved his life, and he fully credits me with doing that. So,
We got to
Go ahead.
talk more in depth about this day too. So as we go along here, I want to dive into that photograph and what happened before and after that. But
Okay, yeah, that was quite a night. My daughter saw a Bigfoot down at the camp where she was, which is a few miles away from where the Sierra camp is. But this is down off the mountain, and after we got down, which was a tough day for me. But here's a little. Remember that trackway, Scott? My daughter had saw one of these that morning. My daughter's the one that read Rhonda, and that's Wendy, my granddaughter, and she was walking a trail maybe 100 yards different than where my daughter saw this thing run across. She thought, oh, Wendy's going to see this thing. So I heading right for her. And we asked Wendy when she got back if she saw anything. And she said, yeah, there's a big white wolf. Came right out in front of me running. They stopped, looked right at me, and then ran up the hill. Well, that gets into skinwalker stuff. And so that's a little freaky. But here's the one. Here's the track trail right here. Everybody see that? Something heavy made that. That's Scott trying to make an indentation in the ground. See how deep those tracks went. Whatever it was very heavy, and it just stopped right here. That's what they're all looking at. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Well, we look up in the trees. We look where could it jump to? Couldn't find where it went. Well, is there anything that answers that? And yes, I do think there is. I hear it for years and years. I've heard about how trackways just disappear. Then all of a sudden you got the researcher looking into it. And he said, well, it's a hoax. It's ridiculous. It's what, is some UFO pick it up and take it off? Well, maybe so, but I think there's another reason. I think it's called density. I think they lose their density because they're able to transfer their mass into energy. And there's pictures of that stuff happening in different researchers. And anyway, I'm looking at another one right now from Jay's video, actually, which I don't know if it's smoke yet, but I'll find out. But there's other reports of this. It's pixelated look when they see them, their energy moving. You can see the plasma energy. Sometimes if the temperature's right, you can see it. And in this film that I was in with David Pilates, the Hunted, Missing 411, The Hunted, he gives about a 15-minute section of me in there. But right after that, there's a really good part that talks about this lady who was she was up in a tree hunting, waiting for the deer, and she's seen this movement from tree to tree, and it looked like an energy pattern. They call it the predator look because that's what it appears like, this pixelated type of floating from one tree to another. And anyway, I think it's energy. I think these things, according to Native American lore too, they go in and out of trees. They live in two worlds. What does all that mean? If they're energy, and we all are at the most minute level of our existence, we are energy, all of us. According to Stephen Hawking, according to Einstein, all of it says energy cannot die. It only changes form. So what are they doing? What's going on? Could it be?
Ron, I don't want you to pass by these track photos here as well either, because not only are they super deep, but they seem to be cutting in almost at a 90-degree angle. And when you're in spongy terraform like that, it's very difficult to cut through at a 90-degree angle. I mean, you would fan out as the pressure goes down in volume from step to step. So these are much, much deeper than Scott's. Not only is the stride bigger, by the way, what is the stride between heel to heel?
I don't know. I was sort of nursing a broken rib right then. Lucky you got the picture.
Yeah. All I know is that it was way beyond what I could produce. And that's me. That's a picture of my feet, my legs right there. I was trying to stretch as far as I could, and I wasn't getting close to them. And plus the fact that my weight wasn't even denting, the soil at all. Not even a quarter of an inch, let alone 4 inches like this.
No, you'd almost have to have some kind of apparatus push down on you to cut through the ground like that, because the needles aren't just slowly sloping down into the print. To cut through like that, they're kind of stabbed down into the ground.
I don't know what it was, but it did. It went right through the forest and then it stopped.
And I used to just write those people off when they told me that they disappeared. A lot of researchers will. But when it happens to you, and especially after a sighting like that, and you find the trackway, come on, what's the answer to it? It's got to be an answer. We have to close these gaps of ignorance. And I think we got to look into quantum physics to understand some of this stuff, because it's how everything in the universe works. And unfortunately, so many researchers are still looking to just Newtonian physics to answer everything, and that's all predictable, measurable, and just not the way things really are. And here's one from Nikola Tesla. I like this guy. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. Got to digest that one for a minute, because I think we're in that right now.
Let's talk a little bit about Nikola Tesla for a second here regarding Henry Franzoni's work. One of the statements he made to us, Ron, was about the trackway, and we'll go just back here and talk just a second about Tesla and the trackways. His theory was that tracks are usually way too shallow or way too deep for what the actual being was doing. And his theory was that there was some kind of vibrational shift happening when these tracks were made. It wasn't just pressure, applied pressure to substrate. There was something else vibrationally going on at a molecular level. Did you see anything like that when you're up there?
Well, no, I didn't. But everything is a vibration, vibrational frequency. And even Tesla says, what one man calls God, another calls the laws of physics. Well, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, he says, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Well, yeah, they vibrate. We're all vibrating in different frequencies, but these things are vibrating. If it would change its vibration from one step to another, for some reason, it would show a difference in the trackway, maybe. But when it totally goes out of your perception, out of making a track, I think it's got to do with their vibrational frequency changed to such a level so high that it just, it goes out of our perception, turns into energy. But somehow they can get back into mass, and that's quite a statement to say. And but if everything is energy, and if these things have learned how to manipulate that or know how because of some DNA manipulation into whatever some alien did, because I do believe there's an alien component to these things, and that's what gives them their humanistic attributes. Quantum physics and spirituality are the same. And a lot of people will call these different dimensions in quantum physics, they call it dimensions, but spirituality, they'll call them heavens or heaven. So really, I don't think there should be a gap between religion. You can't discard religion because you don't like spirituality. You can't discard spirituality because you don't like some religions. That's a better way to put it. What many call the paranormal, the supernatural, a miracle, the woo, God's laws governing everything, I call quantum physics. And I just said this, but you can't discard spirituality because you don't like some religions. We are all spiritual beings, whether you like it or not. Our energy has to go somewhere. We are inside of us a certain energy. We have to respond to things. We have to, we're going to run across problems and situations in this life that we have to respond to. And these things aren't supposed to interfere, I don't think. We have choices. Everybody does. And anyway, I get a little deeper into that as we get into a regular program, but this is just about the end of mine, I think. This is my book that I've written called The Quantum Bigfoot. I get into a lot of this stuff, exploring the attributes of physics through physics, reconnecting quantum entanglement, our 3D perception of reality, because we live in a three-dimensional world. Everybody probably understands that, but there's more dimensions existing that we just don't see or perceive with our eyes. You can receive it, though, if you learn how to relax and get into your third eye. This is all idealistic talking here, but vibrations and frequencies and energies, the importance of language, the pineal gland, the third eye, I think that's very important. Ancient texts, the biblical perspective, all this stuff, and professional findings, and there's a lot more. But this is my first book I come out with. It gives my chronicle of 40 years of doing this, and that's one of our trips going out. This comes with vocalization links or a CD, depends on how you want to get it. You can get it either way. And you want the one color version with the CD in it, you have to order it off my website, ronmorehead.com. So anyway, that kind of does it for me. Oh, I have sold 1 million copies of these. It's supposed to be funny. I don't see how many people laugh. I don't hear anybody laughing. There, is that you laughing, Toby?
It's good. These are what you call dad jokes, by the way, Ron. But go ahead.
This is my, so I can stop sharing now. Because this is the end. The end.
Sure. A question here for Scott while you end your sharing. And thanks for showing those slides. Scott, a question from Thomas Potter. Do you analyze the frequency ranges of the sounds as well? If you do, Scott has a couple recordings he'd like to send your way, and I suppose this will come up as we go forward here. First of all, do you look at frequencies and tell us what you see?
I'll tell you why. I'm not a sound expert. I'm a language guy. Again, I'm a language expert. I'm not a linguistics specialist. Linguistics specialists are scientists, and a lot of people misunderstand that because both of us are referred to as linguists. However, linguistics specialists, you can be a PhD and not speak a word of a foreign language. Not understand that at all. Linguistics specialists are those who can tell you just exactly how does the tracheal tree create this particular sound in relation to where the tongue and the teeth are and the vocal cavity and blah, blah, blah. That's not what I do. I'm a language specialist, not a linguistics specialist. Okay. Also, I've never claimed to be a scientist. I'm an artist, you might say, because language is an art, whereas the science of linguistics is a science. Mm-hmm. Also, I'm not a sound specialist, not an expert on sound frequency, but I can certainly tell you when I put on the headphones and I hear vocalizations, I can certainly tell you from many, many years of professional experience whether or not this could possibly be within the human range or not. Not hooking up any kind of spectrometers or graphic machines of any sort. By the way, Thomas, was it?
Yes.
I would love for you to send me whatever you have. If it's got audio on it, I would love for you to send it to Ron, who will send it to me, especially if it has anything like what we call a morpheme stream in linguistics, something that sounds like what we would call a sentence, not just the whoops and the grunts and the snarls and the growls, something that actually sounds, for instance, like coyotes fighting or apes fighting. Mm-hmm. That is really our holy grail. If I could get 2 or 3 minutes of anything that actually sounds like apes fighting, and if I can slow it down and analyze it and transcribe it, get it on paper, that is the perfect holy grail of the duplication of evidence that we have been looking for 10 years now.
And how do they reach out to you if they want to send you an MP3?
I would say send it to Ron first. Send it to Ron first. I mean, only because if you send it to just send it to Ron first, because he knows what I'm looking for.
Ron's got a smile.
Yeah.
I know what they're saying. I get this stuff really a lot often, Scott. You don't know how many times I get people wanting me to tell them this hoop was a Bigfoot. It's looking for some kind of vindication or something, because they might have seen something, or they know they're in Bigfoot company or something. Mm-hmm. And it might have been a Bigfoot, but it's not what you're looking for. And I know what Scott's looking for. He's looking for the morpheme stream of words. But there is a guy who checks the frequencies out. He's part of the Olympic project, which I'm involved in also. His name is Dave Ellis, and he can be contacted through probably Facebook. Mm-hmm. And he will see the frequency of it and see how it compares, because he's got a log of what coyote sounds like, what owl sounds like, what different things sound like. He compares it to see if the frequency is the same, because it might sound like that, but different frequency.
Mhm.
So Dave Ellis is a good man to get a hold of for that kind
Right,
of
and you can just find him on Facebook, and he's pretty good about answering.
He is. Yeah, he loves what he's doing, and he
Right.
helps people out a lot like that. So, but I can give you all that information too, because I got a guy I've got to respond to now that just contacted me this morning, want me to hear his sounds. And I'm not all I can do is I know what Scott's looking for, and I'll respond to him the best I can. But I'll turn him over to Dave Ellis if he's just looking for what frequency it is, or how it compares to a coyote, or if it's a yell or a scream. Because what we're talking about is language here. We're not talking about some animal sound, but then these things can sound like an animal. What gives them away again is their aptitude, so a different level of aptitude.
Now, Scott, one of the things that Dave always mentions is this percussive huff or percussive quality within the morphine stream, and that seems to really trigger him into a whole different conversation with who's ever sending him the audio file. Have you found that? Yes.
Oh, well, if he gets this, this is what I've called a terminal expression. This is all over in the Barry Morehead tapes, and it's almost always at the end when the being, I don't like calling them creatures, when the being has uttered a long morpheme stream, and then at the very end he'll go off and or he'll go or there'll be a snarl or a little growl along with a and I've called this, many human languages have this. For instance, Chinese, it's has a terminal expression that is kind of like saying, all right, I'm done saying what I was going to say, and now it's your turn to speak. It's almost like CB guys, truckers talking to each other, and they'll say, over.
10-4 rubber duck.
10-4, yeah, it's almost like that. And all of the conversational turns that are on the Barry Morehead tapes between the female and the male, they all have that. Right at the end, there'll be a morpheme stream, very clear. And you'll hear that. Yeah. So, if Dave's got anything like that, if it's preceded by a little morpheme stream, then I want to hear it.
Okay, noted. Let's get into it, Scott. I mean, you have a full system here, just so the audience knows. He has a computer dedicated to a sound file, and we're going to turn on his sound file here and let you take it away.
Okay. Well, let me just get it going here. It went to sleep on us. It won't take me long. Let's see.
That's okay. While you're getting that set up there, Ron, any indication of why, after all this time, the Sierra camps was so successful at getting sounds? I'm sure you get that question all the time, but just looking at things like synchronicity and you as a person and where you were and maybe the geology and the group that was up there. Why you?
Good question. I don't know.
I have a theory on that.
Okay,
and
go ahead.
Again, I was not up there at those times. I've been up there with Ron when we've had some very, very strange things. But having listened to all of the 90 minutes of tape that I have a theory that what Ron and Al had run into was what I have called a perfect storm. You have a group of hunters that had been up there year after year after year. They're carrying guns, they're shooting deer, they're leaving carcasses out, they're leaving deer guts lay around all over the place after they gut the deers. The Sasquatch apparently considered deer guts a delicacy, from what I understand. So the Sasquatch knew that these humans, these hairless apes, were going to be up there, and they knew that they were not going to shoot at them. So they didn't fear them. At the same time, they had to be wary of them. And in Al Berry's tape, there's a very big part in which I will play for you. Ron played part of it, but I can show you what it looks like on the transcription thing. But I think the creatures knew that they could not scare these humans away. In the first place, if any of the humans had gotten scared, there was only one place to run, and that was off the nearest cliff. And none of the humans were going to do that. So I think that again, my theory is that you had the Sierra beings and the hunters there in the area is not that big. So they were held together there by the natural topography of the place and the fact that the Sasquatches were not going anywhere and the human beings were not going anywhere, and they just sort of had to deal with each other. And I think it was just a perfect storm where Ron and Al happened to luck out and be lucky enough to get this stuff on tape. That's my theory.
Could be just luck, yeah. Or who knows, maybe they had a reason for me coming out with it like I've been doing the last few years, to let public know that these things aren't just an ape in the woods, that there's more to them than that. Mm-hmm. I think there's a whole lot more going on in the big picture than most of us want to realize. I mentioned the other day that we have a tendency to think we're in this little bubble of 50 to 80 years old or something like that, and that's all there is to anything. There's a whole billions of years out there that we got to think about. Eons of time when these things could have evolved differently. When aliens have been on this earth, we know that, and get into all this stuff and start looking at the bigger picture, what's really going on, and what we think is going on anyway. Aliens have been here. I've seen the evidence of them all over, and they're probably here now. People are seeing UFOs all the time. In fact, there's a bunch of them seen just yesterday, last night, according to what I'm reading. And anyway, I think they're going to come out, they expose themselves here before too long, and we'll know a lot more. But there's a reason these things are staying so hidden, and so how they do that is one of my theories. I got a theory about that too. So I think it's mass to energy and energy to mass.
Hey, real quick here, Scott. I also have the emails you sent me with the attachments. So if you need to refer to anything on the screen, I can throw it up for you. Just let me know out of the 3 attachments which one you'd like to see, and I can have that ready for the audience to look at.
Well, after I play some of these, the transcription program, and that's really the only difference between what Ron has already played. Much of those clips are going to be the same. Is I can show you the methodology of what crypto-linguists are trained to do. And then you might flash up the that little sampling of what the transcripts look like.
I will do that.
That might be interesting to people.
You just let me know and I'll get it ready for you.
But you can do that after I play a little bit of this. Okay. One thing I would like to qualify, one thing that Ron said that I would like to qualify is, I never say that I'm the only guy that could do this, Ron.
I said that.
Now, yeah, I mean.
No, I didn't say you're the only guy, Scott. I said you're one of the only guys that, I didn't know you guys existed, really.
Yeah.
But, you might tell them about your time in Panama, too. No, sorry. Yes, we have to say that the skills that we are trained in, first off, to be accepted into that program, you have to pass a test that tells
tells you your natural ability for learning languages. And it's believed that actually this test was developed by the U.S. Navy many, many years ago, before my time, and it is still used to this day. Before any person is taken into any language program, they have to pass what's called the Defense Language Aptitude Battery. And we know that only 10% of those people that take that test are able to pass it. And from that, it is believed that there is about 10% of the human population that has this, that it's a lot of us linguists call it the language gene, but we really don't know. But it's something that allows us to assimilate languages much easier than the average person. And this test is what is required in order to get into any of those fields, even to this day. But anyway, so you could say that people that were trained in what I was trained in are rare, but certainly there would be more people out there that could do it if they were willing to and knew about the project. And one of the things I do tell Ron is that I don't know anyone that has listened more than myself to the human voice on tape, except it might be the guy who trained me. His name is Ralph Blessing. I had the opportunity to play these tapes for him when Ron and I presented this study down in Atlanta, Georgia, a few years back. And he was as dumbfounded as I was. Of course, he's got a life of his own. He's married and got, family and a job. And so that gets in the way of a lot of the ability to spend a lot of time on this stuff. But he took those headphones off, what we in the Navy called the cans. And he took one look at me and said he said the same thing that I said to my son. The first moment I heard them, he says, "Scott, there's language there." And I had not even slowed it down for him yet. And as I play this, and the reason I like to play this and show you the transcription program is this is the methodology that we are trained in. Right? And in fact, at the time when Ralph trained me, God, can I tell you the year that was? 1979. These transcription programs were classified. Now, of course, you can go online and buy them for $50 and use them for music, as you'll see here, and everything else. But has anybody got any other questions for me now, right before I turn my little remote camera around and show you the transcription program itself?
Yeah, nothing loaded in the bank here, Scott. It's all yours, and I'll interrupt you if I have to.
Okay. Yeah, let me turn it around here. And what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to let it run at what we call real time. That means at the speed that it was recorded. I'm just going to, and I'll fast forward through some of the dead air, the dead space, so that you hear mostly just the vocalizations. And this tape that I'm playing for you is exactly what Ron sent me that very first day that I got a hold of him. Okay, he sent me both of these tapes, both the Barry tape and the Morehead tape, as I've come to call them. So I'm just going to let it run at real time. And some of you, knowing what you already know, that there's language in it, you will be able to hear. You will start to be able to hear the morphemes and the articulated phonemes, what we call individual sounds, and the morpheme streams. Without me slowing it down, you will already be able to hear that there's language in it. You don't have, once you know that it's there, you don't have to be a PhD in linguistics to hear it. it comes natural to human beings. But then once I will isolate some bit of it, I will loop it, and then I will begin to slow it down. And you most definitely, I've never had anyone that has sat with me through my presentation and gave a good listen to any of this that has ever claimed that it could not be. And I'm quite confident I'll get the same result today. So let's go for it. Okay, here's my okay, and of course you can see this transcription program is also used for music, but it's perfect for what we're doing. Okay, so it's going to start out here with let's see. Oh, here we go. All right. Hopefully you can see my cursor there. I don't know if you can.
No, it looks good from our angle.
Yeah, it does.
You notice how the bottom line is smaller than the top line? I was going to say something about the stereo.
They're both the same. They're just different frequency spectrums.
That's because it was.
But one of the things you will be able to see is the difference between the vocal footprint of the creatures compared to when the humans are speaking. This will be, you will be able to see the difference there. Speaking of sound spectrum. Okay, let me put this up to real time to get it started. And I'm just going to let it run for a little while and let you hear it at real time, and then we'll come back and go through it again and pick pieces out of it to slow down. So here we go, real time. Yep. There we go. Now, why is that doing it? Hold on. Oh, I don't know why I'm cutting out there. Oh, hold on. I don't know. Well, my sound's cutting out, man.
That's all right. Technical glitches.
I want to make sure I'm plugged in. Why don't you guys discuss something else quick while I see There you go. Now it's working. All right, let's see. Here's a good one right here. What I'm going to do, just because we came to a good spot here, I'm going to stop it and show you how crypto-linguists are trained to do. We stop it, we loop it. First we isolate the morpheme stream, then we loop it like this. And then we begin to slow it down, and you'll be able to hear it. And I believe I transcribed that as Befawadi, Befalulu. Now this is in every way a language. You've got morphemes that are uttered both in the query and in the response by two different individuals. There is no clearer definition of language. But let's go on. We'll put it back to 100%. And some of these we'll just, if it sounds interesting, we'll just stop and do it again, slow it down.
Scott, real quick, a question here regarding what they're hearing.
Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as the language itself, these morphine streams, it sounds as though there's language within sucking in on the breath instead of exhaling on the breath. Is that also something that you've learned?
No, absolutely. That's one of the things. The very first moment I heard these sounds, something that I knew was one of the reasons I knew it was not a human being, because they are creating utterances on what we call the pant as well as the exhale. Now, I'm going to turn this around here again real quick. I can kind of show you. Now, human beings are able to do this, but it's very difficult for us. In other words, we can talk like this if we want to, okay? But it's very, very difficult for humans to do that. These creatures, whatever the heck they are doing it with ease. And I think that's part of the reason that it sounds like they're speaking twice as fast as us, is that they are articulating vocal sounds on the inhale or on the pant as well as on the exhale. And you can hear it in every single one of their utterances. They don't speak like humans do, like take a big deep breath and then just yell all the stuff we want to yell out, and then no, they're constantly articulating while they are breathing.
Is that something that you find in primate language as well? I mean, listening to chimpanzees or gorillas, do they exhibit that quality as well?
Well, yes, they do. They make, we can't call them utterances. They make sounds, but they don't articulate language. The only sounds that chimpanzees make are what we might call the vowel sounds. They can go, ooh, 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 ah, ah, oh, ooh, right? But they do not have the apparatus that humans have. They don't have the tracheal tree, the vocal cavity, the teeth, the tongue, the voice box the way we do. And this has been also studied that the only reasons that humans were able to develop this is they had to first develop bipedalism. A biologist by the name of John Morley has become a good friend of ours. He made a study of this as well, found other scientists who had published this, that it was the fact that human beings became bipedal that allowed us to evolve the apparati that we use to articulate our language. And that's one of the most interesting things about these articulations, is that they are articulated in exactly with the same apparatus that we have, because they're exactly the same, except for they're doing it both on the pant and on the exhale. Did that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, no, that answered the question here. Next question here from David. Do you use something other than the IPA symbols to illustrate the utterances?
Yes, what he means is the International Phonetic Alphabet. Right from the start, I chose not to use that because the reason that I was even got involved in this is because I wanted to learn more. I wanted to have more of this so that I could demonstrate that whatever this creature is, it's producing a language. It has a language. And so I created the Sasquatch phonetic alphabet, which you have a copy of, which you have the latest revision of that. And by the way, it's due for another revision because of things we've found. I created the Sasquatch phonetic alphabet based on really the NATO phonetic alphabet, with a bunch of sounds thrown in that humans don't, well, Not that we're not capable of making them, we just don't do them often. Things like tooth pops and tongue clicks, things like this. I included those in the Sasquatch phonetic alphabet. But one of the main, and I get this question a lot, and I get it from academics who are pretty snooty about it. Well, why didn't you just use the IPA? Well, because anybody that's ever tried to use the IPA knows that it is notoriously difficult to understand. I created the Sasquatch phonetic alphabet for field researchers. And right in the SPA, there's a big section on this is what I'm asking you to do when you're out there. Even if you're unable to collect these things on tape, try, and if you hear a morpheme stream, try to remember what it is, try to remember what it was, what it sounded like, and write it down using the Sasquatch phonetic alphabet, the SPA, I call it. So that's the easy answer to that question is why did I not use the IPA? Now, hey, I don't care in the future what linguistics specialists want to take any of these sounds and transcribe them according to the IPA, or even take my transcriptions and turn them over into the IPA. But what good that will do anyone, I don't know.
Okay, Scott, do you want me to go ahead and show that slide of the SPA?
Well, you can show the SPA. It might, yeah, if you want to show it down, if you want to show down further where it shows the actual transcription key.
Okay, let me get this.
That might be.
You. Can you see my screen okay?
Transcription key.
Okay, let me move it around here and widen the view here. Okay. Tell me how low you want me to go.
I'll keep going. It's the last thing on there, I think.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, there you go. That shows, that's the alphabet right there. And that shows, for instance, just a capital, what we would call an A, but it's an A as in can, okay? The one above that, as in father, and so on down throughout the whole alphabet, to include sounds that are compound phonemes. Then, of course, every transcription has to have an abbreviation key. And by the way, these transcripts are transcribed according to military standards of procedure. Oh, there you have this. There you have there. Now you're showing the very first part of the Barry Morehead, or on the Al Barry tape, and I could kind of read some of these off.
Yeah, please do.
First, you hear the whistles, and you've got the transcription key there with the W. Okay, and then you have Ramho, Baruchahu, Vamvo. Let's see, Wamvo. No plamentichu. Here you see the who on the end that you asked me about before, those terminal expressions.
Right.
You said Dave was coming up with?
The percussive huffs, he calls them.
Then it goes, no plamentichu, narla, nagoku stepgakoblem, okuja, frappe hukle. Unikuogo wa adowaino muy fuiko pico. Let's see, kuono plenduchtish si jao glopumech paki hoku dotosexi.
Now, Scott, these sounds that you're doing impressions of, for lack of a better term, you're not doing the inhale or what you're calling.
No. That would be impossible for me. So, yes, okay. I have actually taken this exact page that you have here, taken it out there at the Sierra camp, crawled up under the big giant boulders that we think those creatures were coming from, and shouted this out. Now, when you listen to it on the tape, which you just have, it's much faster, much faster. So to those creatures that were articulating this, this must sound like a child or someone who is mentally slow, actually trying to duplicate these sounds.
Yeah. And in your opinion too, I've heard you speak about this before. Is there any evidence in the recordings of them trying to slow down their language to speak to Ron so he could understand them?
Yes. Okay. Not in this tape, not in the Barry tape. I couldn't find anything because I've gone back and forth. And in the Barry tape, which is what we're looking at here, and in fact what we're listening to, what I had on the transcription program, there's nothing in the Barry tape that tells me that they were trying to communicate with the humans at all. It was all about, they were speaking to each other. Well, I have to qualify that. Where I think they were communicating with the humans is where the big male goes off and just starts screaming at them. And not with language, but with very, very intimidating vocalizations. And I could, Ron played part of that, but if you see it all, how it takes place from one point to the next, it's really, really scary. And I swear, if I'd have been up there, I'd be dead because I would have ran off the nearest cliff.
Yeah, there's a really famous part of the tapes where it's almost like this. Yeah, it's Is there language within that sound?
No. There are a couple of little phonemes, but most of it's not. Most of it's snarling and growling and what we would call ululation. In linguistics, that would be called ululation, like that. But nothing. Again, to answer your question, nothing at all that tells me that they were trying to speak language to the humans. On Ron's tape is very different, and he played you some of those where the being is going very much slow. In fact, not creating utterance on the pant at all. It was all on the exhale, as if they were even trying to mimic the fashion, the method in which we humans speak, by inhaling in and then uttering out. There's you've got one of the creatures on Ron's tape going, she's the female who is farther away from the mic at this point. She's going, wacko. And then you hear the big male go, wacko.
Now you said female. How do we know that? As someone who's a linguistics expert, what is happening vocally for you to say that?
That she's a female?
Yeah.
The same way I could tell you if you were listening to a female in the other room. You don't have to be a sound expert to know that it's a female talking in the other room, unless it's a guy who can very well mimic a female.
Right.
No, you don't have to. No, this is
there's nothing in your training,
spectrometer or something, and tell you, oh yeah, this is a higher spectrum, but he still could not scientifically say, oh, that's a female.
So there's nothing happening vocally for you to say for certain with your training that this is a female and this is a male.
Yes.
Okay. That was the question.
By the way,
go ahead.
By the way, the Russians and the Persians, the Iranians, in my day at least, they used just as many female radio operators as they used male operators.
Can you give an example of a ululation with your computer program to show the difference between a morphine stream and a ululation? Do you have that ready?
Yeah, let me get it back here. Do you want to look at it?
Yeah.
Let me give it to you. Okay. Yeah, we're almost here at one point to where they are, and I'll back it up a little bit to where I can see. I gotta make sure my speaker here turns off if it's not, being prompted all the time. All right, here's where he starts. You hear him go. I don't know why this is doing that again. Damn it. Yeah. Here's a spot coming up here. Jeez.
I'm going to go back to it. That's okay, Scott. It's almost like it's buffering. It needs a minute.
Try this. I think this might do it. Now here's an exchange. Now, that spot there, you should have been able to tell that that was a female and a male going back and forth. I will go back here again. Where it is. There it is, right here. Try it again. You should have been able to tell the difference between that female and the male arguing about something. Of course, we don't know if they're arguing or if that's just the way they talk. But they sound like an old married couple, stepping on each other, vocally, I mean. Now, here's a spot, a very good spot that I like to use because it's to demonstrate the methodology here, real time. See, this is very clearly an articulated language that has syntax. In fact, all language does. Very clearly, Vananu wa nagibash. There's no reason in the world for any creature to be making these sounds if not for linguistic communication. Now, I will go over here, and you wanted to find some of the real scary ululation stuff. Let me put it back to real time again. Yeah. The little one? That's the little one. Now he builds himself into a rage. There's part of the ululation. Get through some of this dead air. Come on, Vicky. Come on down. Now that's the humans. Hello, boy. That's part of the other reason we know that I knew it wasn't fake. You can't fake that. Taping humans and Sierra beings vocally stepping on each other. Okay, Biggie, here comes the tip. What did it sound like it was coming from? Which direction? Now that's them. They didn't know they were getting all of that, so they wanted to put the microphone back up closer to where they thought the sounds were coming from. But then they didn't immediately go back into the lean-to, so the big one starts getting mad.
Actually, Scott, that was the food that they were moving, not the microphone.
Vocal footprint and that of the Sierra being. That's still humans. Here we go. This is where he starts getting mad. He's building himself up into that rage. Here he goes. You hear that terminal utterance there. See, they're not going back into the tent yet. Finally, he loses his temper. Here he goes. Then they have a little argument here. He slowly calms down, and it's almost like she was telling him, hey, here's these nice little hairless apes giving us some food, so why don't you just mellow out so we can go get the food.
Your volume's breaking out just a little bit here. You're not as clear as you were. I can still hear you, but see if we can get your mic.
I mean, I didn't do nothing to the volume.
Okay. Let's see.
Better?
It's a little bit weaker here. Maybe look at it while I'm asking you some questions here, Scott. Someone had a question about Tibetan throat singers as far as they're doing a pant inhale on their Tibetan throat singing. Is there any similarities between what you found and Tibetan throat singers?
You'll have to ask me that question again.
The Tibetan throat singers, any similarities?
I know what you're talking about. They they seem to produce sounds that are unnatural for humans. If you're talking about the ones that they go very, very down deep, yes, they do create some sounds that are almost unhuman. But would they be able to do anything like this? No, of course not.
Okay, Ron, and you were talking about Thinker Thunker basically agreeing with what Scott's saying here, but doubling up on it. And he put forth some evidence that in your sounds, he's found evidence that they're using more than one vocal cord in order to make this sound. Is that what you're saying?
Well, he didn't say that. I had somebody else say that. Thinker Thunker says they do 5 octaves in one tone.
Okay.
Which the most any human can do is 3 octaves in one tone. You can do all 5 octaves, but not in the same tone. Mm-hmm. He did a 20-minute segment on that. It can be found in the Thinker Thunker / Sierra Sounds. It's quite interesting to hear his analysis of this, because if I can just get it established by some university or some place with tackle of an engineer somewhere and give a statement on that, one way or the other, I just need to know whether I can use it as credible. As much as we don't know. He did, anyway, just have to look it up and think about it. Throat singers, though, getting back to that, I had that suggested to me years ago, and I started listening to throat singers. They are unique. That's a trained attributes that they have to dig out and use. But it's quite interesting, but it's nothing like what these things are making, sounds these are making. But it does travel over long distances.
Another question here for Scott. This is from Jay again. Scott was almost able to reproduce this language. Could you theorize that this is human, a lost language or a lost tribe, Homo sapien sounds? Just curious.
Well, they could be Homo sapiens if we categorize them the same way we categorize ourselves as sapient, because it's language that puts us over the top.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we're going to define these creatures by the same definition that we define ourselves, then we have to call them sapient.
Mm-hmm.
Now we could call them other thing. We could call them what Linnaeus first called them. Really, we could call them caveman. Homo, which means man. Troglodytes, man that lives in the cave. And the guy that invented, taxonomy, scientific taxonomy, even included them in our lineage. Other than that, my personal opinion is, knowing that they have language, knowing that they articulated by the same apparatus that we have, I have to categorize them for myself, not being a scientist. I have to categorize them as a giant, hairy, wild man. A cousin, a species. They have to be every bit as close to us as the Neanderthal was. And by the way, my good friends, the Russian scientists, they believe that he is a remnant Neanderthal.
Are we all?
Well, yeah, most of us, yes. We share DNA, right?
Yes, yeah, 1 to 3%, something like that. Depends on who you are. Maybe
Ron, Scott, I'll ask you too, and Ron, you can chime in as well. Scott, you've used the Sierra sounds to elicit a sighting, haven't you?
I'm sorry?
You've used the Sierra sounds to elicit a sighting?
No. I've not used this Sierra sounds to elicit a. I've gotten vocal responses back, nothing linguistic. In fact, what I've gotten was what I call a concession snarl, and I've got 12 of those. I got those in Missouri. I got them up on the Sierra camp. Well, those are the two places. Ron, where I got it over here in Missouri is where you went with me to the I can't say the guy's name because he doesn't want me to say it. The farm.
I was going to say his name, so I guess I won't say it either.
Yeah. Only because he doesn't want to be inundated. He was inundated by BFRO people, and he didn't want that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't want me to say his name, but I got that response over there. And the concession snarl, the reason I call it that is because it's almost as if I could put myself in their mind, they're going, okay, these poor guys are really trying hard to communicate with us. And, they're not bad because they leave food out for us and they sing songs for us and they play a drum. So let's give them a little something. And I will hear this. It's like the huh that you're talking about before, with a snarl that follows it up and trails off. And I've heard that 12 different times that I've documented down.
What about names? Were there any names ever mentioned or directed towards Ron or vice versa? Was Ron's name ever used or Al Berry's name ever used in a stream?
No, but there are places where it really sounds like they are calling one of the other ones a name. Ron, there was that time that I heard my name right after the next morning after I saved your life. Remember that?
Yes, I do. You had more than that happen, though.
Yeah, that was right. That was right before we got up and saw the horses, up the one upside down.
Okay, wait, now hold on. You guys we got to start. We got to go from the beginning here because we looked at the slide and I've heard bits and pieces of the story, but I haven't heard it all. So let people in on what happened that day or that weekend.
Oh, gosh.
There's so many people that
All right,
don't
we
know
were
how
trying to get
incredible
up to
this
the
is.
camp, Scott and I. I had a pack animal, which wasn't really a pack animal, but it was mine. I'd been feeding it all winter, so time to make it pay for itself. I was packing her. I got a trail-ready horse, supposedly I just bought a few weeks before. That's supposed to be a good trail horse. And I gave Scott Mo, my really good trail horse that I knew could make the trip up there. And Scott got on her. I got on mine, and right off the bat, we couldn't even make it up halfway. The horses got spooked at different things. It could have been anything. You don't know, because he's all but Mo. Mo is the only one that'd been up there before the one Scott was on. So he was out ahead of me a couple hundred yards probably, which I kind of regretted later when I had my horse throw me and I was off and sprung my wrist, broke one of my reins on the horse's bridle. So I was trying to manipulate the horse. Still, I had to load up the pack again because the mare went off the edge. It was a nightmare. Anyway, I got up there, finally got everything back together, and I was up there, caught up with Scott, and he was up there, and Mo wouldn't go any further. She just frozen right there. I said, "Kick her, Scott. I can't stop. If I stop this horse, they're going to start thinking about it and head back down." They didn't like what they were doing at all. But she wouldn't move. Sure enough, my horse started spinning around. Okay, I might as well jump off this sucker because he's fixing to throw me again. So I jumped off, landed where I wanted to land, and started walking back down to catch him because I knew they wouldn't go very far. I went down past those big rocks, Scott, where those are. And there he was standing down there. And by then my feet were really hurting because I'd taken, this was getting late in the day already. Scott said, "We're not going to make it." I said, "I know, we're not going to get to camp. We're going to stop somewhere and camp out on the way or else go back." So we decided, I think, kind of to go back. Scott, the horses go back, but they wouldn't go forward any. Something was, we don't know again what was spooking them. It could have been anything, a mountain lion, a bear, whatever, but it was a nightmare of a day. Scott saw me get back on my horse down there past those rocks. Then I guess he just saw me up in the air and come back down. He didn't see the horse. And I landed between a couple boulders, knocked the wind out of me. Oh man, it hurt.
I'll tell that part about when I saved your life.
Yeah, that's when he saved my life, because he was going to leave me there. I'm bear bait if you leave me here, Scott. Anyway, he helped me get my boots off, and I couldn't. I was having trouble. Got one of my, I think I got my walking boots on then, didn't I? So anyway, whatever. Got down at the bottom. I had a sprung wrist. I couldn't load the horses. I happened to load it in the trailer, but I couldn't shift the gear shift on the truck because my wrist was still swollen. I don't know if you remember that or not. I thought it might be broken. It was so big. It was just sprung, found out. So anyway, Scott drove the trailer and the horses around to where my daughter was camped, and we camped out there, and I couldn't head back because I knew Scott was having an issue trying to pull that 26-foot horse trailer around with that big truck. And I didn't want him to try that going downhill. And I wasn't about to try it with my wrist the way it was. So I thought we better just lay up here for a day or two. Anyway, from there, Ron had a sighting next morning. We found a trackway, but a lot of stuff happened that night. And Scott, you can take it from there if you want to.
Okay. So we'll skip over the part about where I saved his life, even though that's my favorite part. But actually, no, we won't, because what happened is I was above him on the trail. I saw him get thrown off the horse again. I mean, that horse sent him 20 feet in the air. And from my perspective, he looked like he came down and hit those rocks. And I didn't hear a sound. And I'm going, "Ron, Ron." So anyway, I got off of Mo. I make it back down where he is. Ron is not moving. He has landed between these two rocks, and he is not moving. He's got busted ribs. He's got what we thought was a broken arm. And I'm going, and it's already starting to get dark. So I didn't see him even move. So I thought he was dead. So the way I saved his life is I just reached down and I goes, "Ron, if you're alive, stay here. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm going down for help."
No, you're not.
And that's when his hand, suddenly he came alive and grabbed my arm and said, "You're not leaving me up here alone." So Anyway, I got him down off that mountain, and the next morning, somehow we got him set up in the tent, and he could hardly move. And that next morning, before the sun came up, I was starting to rouse, and I'd sat up on my sleeping bag on my side of the tent, and just to where the mountain starts, and the cliff that goes up to the Sierra Camp is right there, goes all the way up. It couldn't have been 20 yards away from me, and there was a dirt road. The dirt road ran between our tent and the side of the mountain there. And I barely sit up, and I hear this, Scott! I hear my name pronounced very clearly by what I felt was a female voice. And I goes, what the? Did you hear that, Ron? Ron said, yeah, Ron says, did you see it? Because it wasn't light yet. Ron said, was that Rhonda? They were still over it with the people camp, at least a couple miles away. There were no people there. Ron said, did you see any headlights? I said, no, there's no cars out there. There's nobody over here. He says, you're sure that wasn't Rhonda? I said, yeah, I'm sure. So anyway, we wait a few more minutes. The sun starts coming up, and I said, I'm going to go out. Ron couldn't move. I said, Ron, I'm going to go check, I'm going to go check the horses. And I no sooner opened the tent flap and stood out and stepped out is that the horses were, what would you say, Ron? Maybe 40 yards away?
Oh,
30?
maybe 40 feet.
Oh, well, yeah, they were picketed. They were picketed out on this line, not very far away from the tent. And the first thing I saw was the horse that I was on. The horse that at that moment, I had credited that horse with saving my life up there the day before, because Ron's horse did not help him. I saw Mo, my horse, laying on its back with all of its feet straight up in the air. And the first words out of my mouth was, oh my God, Ron, Mo is dead. And Ron said, what? Oh my God, what? And so Ron's trying to get up. He looked like Quasimodo, walking with his arms and his ribs. And he gets up, and we walk over there. And the reason I thought that is because I grew up around horses up in the mountains in Utah and Wyoming. And the only time I ever in my life saw a horse laying on its back with all four of its legs straight up in the air was when it had died and got bloated from death. And was a couple times I saw him that had been stuck in an irrigation ditch upside down and had died. So that's what I said to Ron. So me and Ron, I help him to go over to the horses. First off, one of the horses had been let off of the picket with something that had an opposable thumb, because it had latches on it that required a thumb to remove the latch to let it off of its halter. So one of the horses was completely gone. And we got over there and saw Mo, and he was somehow had been picked up, turned upside down, and lodged between two trees, one on its hind end and one on its neck, so that I don't know how it could even breathe. We walked up to the horse. I still thought it was dead, because in the way it had been manipulated in between those trees, I thought it had been killed. And Ron, God, I don't know how he decided to do this, but he says, no, I think he's still alive. And he grabbed Mo's halter and yanked on it, which I thought it was going to break the horse's neck anyway, and kept yanking on it. Finally unlodged Mo, this horse, from that tree, he stood up, shook it off as if nothing had ever happened to him. Of
Her.
course, he had scrapes and bruises and cuts all over him from the previous day and whatever had done that to him that night. But that was one of the strangest things that I had ever seen.
Well, Maddie, the pack horse, was the one that got turned loose, and she came back and was standing there watching us. She never ran off and got lost. You know, she was just standing there with her free as a bird. She could have went anywhere, but she didn't.
She had been let loose.
Yeah, but why did she leave? I don't know. Strange night, but that wasn't all that happened. The next night, Rhonda moved her tin over next day, Rhonda and Wendy. And then I guess the next morning is when she saw the Bigfoot, because we had to lay up there a couple of days. I wasn't about to try to drive that truck back down the canyon, down the valley. So anyway, that's when we've seen the disappearing trackway. Things like that were going on. Scott thought he felt, well, I won't say what you thought you felt, but there's a lot of strange anomalies around these things. Not just that, but I mean, some lights. I see where one of the questionnaires wanted me to expound on what I meant by aliens indoctrinating us.
Yes, in fact, Toby, I saw one question on there about the cantaloupe that I insisted we bring a couple cantaloupes up there. And
that's a good one. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So we had those packed in. You know, Ron didn't like the idea because they're big and heavy. And I said, no, I'm going to give them as a treat. And of course, this is the first time I'd ever been up there or tried to make it up there. And so the first time Ron got thrown and the pack horse went tumbling down the mountain, Ron had to go down and recollect her and as much of our gear as he could. And you tell him what you found, Ron.
Well, I found everything I could and brought her back up, tied her up. And Scott's still a couple of yards ahead of me. He don't know any of this has happened, I guess, at the time. And I started repacking her as best as I could and tying her and everything like that. So I found, I didn't find all the cantaloupes, so I found, I think, 2 of them. There was 4 altogether, I think. Anyway, when later on, a few hours later, when we was heading back down, when all this other stuff started happening, I found a cantaloupe, not where she spilled them, but over on the trail, one of those switchback trails, and it was eaten out. I mean, like, I don't know.
Taking a bite of it.
Well, it just, a bird, I thought, well, could a bird done this? It was cleaned out, just so cool. And I should have took pictures of that, but I wasn't feeling like taking pictures of anything, much less that. Felt like killing a horse right there. Actually, that horse I paid a couple $1,000s for, and it just was nothing. Anyway, it goes on from there. It's another night for another story.
Let's go back to the moment where you saw the horse, Scott. I remember a detail I think you missed regarding experimental rubber balls maybe bouncing around the woods. I got that part right?
I'm sorry.
There's something to do with rubber balls, the sounds of rubber balls being bounced around the woods at night.
Oh.
The tether ball that you put on that stuff is what he's talking about. You put the feathers around it or something like that. Remember you heard that ball bouncing? Is that what you're talking about?
I don't remember the rubber ball. No, I found some very, very strange stuff. I found we started finding things left on our picnic table. There were no humans around besides us, but we found some stuff. I still have it. For instance, there was a little plush, not a plush toy, a little rubber toy whale, like a blue whale. A little rubber blue whale completely caked in mud, old dried mud that had been left on our picnic table with, and a different morning, 2 little toy soldiers that were all completely, I still have them, that were caked in old dirt, old dried dirt that were there. interestingly, one of them, and see, I never even talked to Ron much about this because I got to the point where I was not going to impose a lot of stuff on Ron because I was worried about him. But one of the little soldiers had a gun, was shooting, and the other one had a pair of binoculars. And they were set up facing each other. I still have those. And it just gets, there's so much. And by the way, I have all of this down in my journals that I kept. It gets too bizarre. And there comes a point, Toby, where you almost decide you don't want to talk about it because you're certain that everybody's going to think you're nuts. In fact, the first 5 years that me and Ron began to present this study together, we would go out to conferences like yours up in Oregon and present the study. For the first 5 years, we actually had a verbal agreement. This is Ron. Are we going to talk about the weird stuff? At that time, we called it paranormal stuff or just the weirdness of it all. Now we don't call it paranormal anymore. But for the first 5 years that we would go and present up there or in Honobia or Santa Cruz, other places that brought us out to talk about it, we had made an agreement that we were not going to talk about the weirdness. But then it just got to a point, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, we'd be up there on that mountain and we just say, we can't we cannot not talk about it anymore, Ron, because it's beginning to feel like we're lying by omission. And that's when we decided, look, we're just gonna tell the truth. Whatever the hell happens to us up there, or whatever the hell happens to us wherever we are, we're just gonna start telling the truth because people think we're crazy anyway. So why not tell the truth? And so I think that's what we've done in the last 5 years.
Ron, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
I mean, there's a lot to the stories up to these areas.
I've been doing this for 50 years almost, and it just it goes on and on. I talk about it anytime I think about it. I'll talk about it. If somebody asks me,
right?
They need to ask me because I don't feel like anybody's ready for the answer unless they're ready to ask the question.
Well, there's a part inside the documentary that I'm going to turn my gallery view on here. Let's see what we got here. There we go. Regarding the documentary, The Hunted, the David Paulides documentary that you both are in, you talk in particular about seeing the lights. And Paulides turns to you around the campfire and says, is it embarrassing to talk about? And I think that's an important question that he asked. There is a sense of pride and ego that gets in the way of the weirdness here. And I would think that first 5 years when you guys had an agreement, that must have slipped in. This is too nuts to talk about. We have to save face a little bit here. I mean, this is a whole new level of bizarre activity.
Well, Toby, there's so much of this stuff being reported nowadays and has been for the last few years that why not just tell what happened to me and what's been happening and let it go with that. I'm letting my ego go. I don't know. Ego makes us human. We all have egos. But there seems to be a competition in this field of Bigfootology here. And I don't want to be part of that. I just tell what is and what I think and do what you want. I'm 77 years old now. I don't care. People believe it or not, it happened. What's befuddling to me is all these scientists, I think, want to believe me. They've never, to my knowledge, ever questioned any of the other hunters. And a couple of them are still alive. And why wouldn't they want some corroboration of what this is all about? I mean, I'm the only one talking about this. These other guys just stay in the background. They don't I mean, Warren Johnson, who passed away a few years ago, Al Berry passed away a few years ago. We're all passing on, and yet this is such a story. It'd make one heck of a movie. And I've been, approached by several production companies, but they all want to tell me what to say, and I'm not going to have that. I've got to tell my story. I've got to be the executive producer, or I'm not going to go with it. And it pretty much wipes it out right there. But the story needs to be told, and it needs to be told the way it is, the way it happened.
Mhm.
My take on it is another issue, because some people just don't believe in quantum physics. I don't know how they can not believe that. They've got their head in the sand if they don't know what quantum physics is all about. I mean, they don't have to know what it's all about, but at least understand that it is how everything in the universe works. And all these people are still going by, oh, if you don't see it, it don't exist. If you can't measure it, it isn't there. Well, one of these guys tell me how far it is in the universe, and come on, how small can small get? Quantum physics is the answer to all these anomalies that are happening, and they're really just something we need to understand. And if you understand a little bit how quantum physics works, it's not that hard to get your head around. You never understand all of it, but you can. I mean, how do you explain time don't exist as we perceive it? It doesn't. We're just living from day to day in a linear timeline for time. If you get out of this dimension, doesn't exist the same way. How do you get past the thing that nothing is real till it's observed? Well, that's a crazy thing to say. How can anything not be real? If you see it, it's got to be real. Well, what is happening with our eyes and our perception? How's this stuff happening? It's through quantum physics. And it's how everything works. And these astronauts, these scientists, these physicists, they know this stuff, but it's hard to get the common mainstream science attuned to this, because so many people believe all that's happening is what they can see, feel, and touch. With their Newtonian physics they learned in the 5th grade. And that's too bad. They just need to expand themselves a little bit, open up out of their parameters, and understand there's a bigger picture to this whole thing going on. With the UFO intervention that's happening, more and more Bigfoots are being seen. It's coming to a head. Something's going to give. And well, I was raised religiously. I'm not religious now, but we're all spiritual, whether we like it or not. So I know biblical scriptures, and there's one in Luke 17:35, I think, and it says, "As it was in the days of Noah." This is one of the first things I ran across when I started studying the Bible, started studying where giants came from. Well, Christ said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it should also be in the second coming." Well, I want to find out, well, what was it like the days of Noah? That's when aliens were intervening in humanity, changing the genome, creating Nephilim, the giants. Okay, there's a giant for you in Genesis. You get into the book of Enoch, which is not canonized, but you can start studying all this stuff, and stuff starts coming together for you. And it's a bigger picture. As it was in the days of Noah, well, if that's happening, then UFOs are coming here now. They're going to be more and more. Aliens are going to offer us advanced technology, which you got to watch for, because just be careful. There's a dark side out there. There's a good side too. And we all have what they call guardian angels, if you have, but that may be the mind speak that you're hearing sometimes when you go to right instead of left. You got to pay attention to that. It's important to have your heart-mind coherent so that your brain is acting with a heart rhythm. And once you get that energy working in your behalf, you'll go the right way. So there. It is Sunday. Come on, give me a break.
The paranormal world has a lot of branches on it. When you're looking down the scope at UFO activity and people that are invested into hauntings, and then you have the world of the cryptid. Those three branches in particular come up over and over again. But as it relates to something called hitchhikers, I wonder if you're familiar with something following you back home. And I'll pose that question to Scott. After looking into this, do you find that the supernatural is approaching you as though it's seen you look at it?
I saw that question by Nancy there, and I was right away. I came up with a real easy answer. Yes. No, but
Too easy.
in a lot of ways, in a lot of strange ways. Of course, I live in Missouri. I live on the Missouri River corridor, and I'm quite sure that they migrate seasonally up and down the Missouri River corridor, because the Momo here, what we call them out here, the Missouri Monster, that name was given to them 100 years ago. and there are hundreds and hundreds of newspaper articles going back 100 years. They, I think it would be natural for me to see phenomena out here, which I did once I got started on this. Me and Stephen would go out in the woods and we'd have strange things happen and different vocalizations. Nothing linguistic, by the way, again. But again, a couple of those concession snarls. But beyond that, just being out there in the woods and being squatchers, because Stevie loved doing it so much. I lived in a house in Lone Jack, Missouri that butted up against a huge area of forest, a conservation area actually. And I had red foxes out there. I had some bird feeders out there. I loved the birds, the big woodpeckers that would come and stuff. So anyway, I had a rock out there in the back that I would leave food. I didn't feel like throwing food away when I could take it out there and give it to the foxes or the coyotes. So I started leaving food out on this rock. And me and the kids, we just called it the food rock. So go give it to the food rock, and, me and Ron had been doing this but I never imagined anything other than foxes or coyotes coming up. I suspected that there were Sasquatch beings around, but not at my house. And then I started finding a particular type of little rock, and it would always be laid. And I know coyotes are not doing this. I know red foxes are not doing this. And they would be of a different color each time. Sometimes they would be a pinkish color, but they would be almost a complete sphere, a little circle, maybe a little flattened sphere, but completely smooth, like it had come from the bottom of a stream of some sort, which I had no real streams going past my house. Something was leaving, and I have almost all of them. One of my ex-girlfriends took a couple of them, but I have some of them, and they're varying in size from all of them fairly big, from about that big to 3 inches in diameter, and they were all laying either on top or very close to this what we call it the giving rock, because we were giving food to the animals. That was one thing that I cannot explain. I don't think it was coyotes.
I got one.
Okay, go for it.
Well, I think I've talked about this before, but up at the camp one evening when these beings were around after we all settled in the shelter, I say it's all, there was 3 of us up there, Bill McDowell and Lewis Johnson and myself, and we were bedded down inside the shelter. We heard this clicking noise out by the stove, sounded like a rhythmic clicking, and didn't know what to think about it, but it kept moving up towards our shelter, which is probably, maybe 30, 40 feet away. And as it got real close to the shelter, all of a sudden it was inside the shelter, the clicking sound. We turn our lights and it stops immediately. Turn the lights off and it starts again. This went on for quite a while, and anyway, later, all of a sudden stopped. But later down in the valley, I was out at my pasture irrigating, and I heard this clicking sound, the same sound, like castanets. And I looked around for it, and I couldn't find it. And I couldn't find the source of it, but it kept clicking. And I asked Bill about a few years later, I asked him, Bill, did you ever have anything happen to you at home? Because I've had, pounding on my house and stuff like that, my ranch house and stuff like that. But this was a definite daytime if something went on. He said, yeah, remember that clicking sound we had at the camp up there? I said, yeah. He says, I had that in my place down where he lived in the valley. I follow him. So it's like whatever it was, we don't know what it was, but it had come to us again at our homes. And I've heard a lot of people report about these things messing with you at night. I call it the witching hour during the night. Generally, it's when it happens, but these were the daytime. And it's just interesting stuff, because the witching hour is when our frequency lowers, our bodily frequency, when we start to go into the alpha theta state of sleep awareness and get into almost a dream state. I think that's when the Earth's frequency also lowers, according to the human resonance. By the way, that just went off the charts here again recently. Anybody read that? It's kind of something to watch for. Same time, a bunch of UFOs we're seeing too. Anyway, I'm rattling on here, but what I'm getting at is, yes, they once they get into you, and once they're interdimensional, I believe, they can go from the third dimension into the fifth. We see them in the plasma state of the fourth dimension of time. That's when they're seen as cloaking. I get my woo-woo stuff going on, but it's just quantum physics. And it's how things can really work and the science behind it. Al Berry told me one time, he says, whatever you do, stay with science. Don't talk about the woo-woo stuff. So I tried to stay with science, and I got into quantum physics. I asked a couple of guys years ago, professors that I knew, what do you think about quantum physics? And because I believed in the Bigfoot, but it hadn't been proven yet. They said, don't even talk about quantum physics. You can't get a body, bring it in, and let's cut apart. It's not going to exist. So that's unfortunate. We don't have academia on board with this. Even when you got Dr. Curlin's report saying those tapes are genuine, and I'm sure Scott wouldn't even have tried to tackle them if he had known the credibility of the actual tapes themselves were not manipulated, were not speeded up, not slowed down, not anything done. Yet you get academia that still won't tackle it. They're afraid of their tenure, maybe afraid of not getting the funds for the next project they want to do. They can't lose credibility within their community of golfers. It's just shame.
Toby, I just thought of something very, very weird. That you mentioned synchronicity before. If you don't, I don't mean to butt in on you, Ron.
Oh, go ahead. I'm just rattling.
But here I was doing this with Ron. We'd been doing this for about 5 years, and at Wentworth College, where I taught for many years, they were putting up a new display case of old alumni, right? And so I was interested in that, some good old pictures of alumni, and I'll be damned if they didn't put up a picture of Marlin Perkins. And I said, and they even put up a little thing that had the thing, and the people that were doing this had no idea that I was involved in this research. They even put up a little plaque in front of this picture of Marlin Perkins. I don't know if you guys know who Marlin Perkins is.
Mutual of Omaha.
Yeah, but he was the first guy to go on national TV with his own show about wildlife. And I didn't even know this about him. But on this little plaque, it said he said he was the first guy to have a wildlife show. Well, the Wild Kingdom, Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, right? And then on this plaque, it says he was also involved in the first expedition into the Himalayas in search for the abominable snowman.
I got something going. I got the rest of the story to get through.
I had no clue. I mean, I'd loved Wild Kingdom, but I had no clue that he had been, had done that. But then after that, of course, I had bragging rights that all of my crazy stuff, I'm just following in the footsteps of the Wentworth footsteps of Marlin Perkins, right? Who had graduated from the college that I was teaching at.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that part.
Yes.
Peter Byrne, who most of us know that name, who I brought up in my presentation earlier, he was really the first guy on the Tom Slick expedition to go over there and start investigating the Yeti, the abominable snowman. Yep. And the big deal was the hand, supposedly from a Yeti, all guarded by the Sherpas up there. And he actually got the Sherpa drunk one night and replaced one of the fingers of the Yeti with a human finger. And when Perkins went in there years later to check all this out, he found the human finger and said, well, this is a human. It's not. Anyway, he snuck it out. Peter did. I don't know if I should tell this story or not, because it's kind of funny, but it's real. And he snuck it out in Jimmy Stewart's wife's lingerie, and because they were good friends, Jimmy Stewart and Peter Byrne. And anyway, it ended up over in Europe someplace. It's gotten lost somehow, because no one knew about DNA in those days. This is in the 50s, you know, 50s, 60s, right in there, when Peter was doing the safaris over in the Nepal. So there's the rest of now you've heard the rest of the story. But that brings it to Marlin Perkins and the Much of Omaha episode where they said it was a phony because they found the human finger in there.
Scott, has Ron's investigation into the supernatural, into the world of quantum physics, moved your research forward?
You won't offend me, Scott. Go ahead.
No. Well, not linguistically, but see, Ron and I were of the same mind from the very beginning. I mean, our first trips up there. Of course, you know, you don't have much to do up there on the average day other than to sit and philosophize. And that's been my mindset, you know, for my whole life. So we always talked about, you know, what could be happening. You know, and we talked about quantum physics. We had both studied it. I teach a whole unit, even to this day, I teach a unit in the philosophy of science in my intro to philosophy class. And I spend a lot of time about quantum physics because it's the only place you're going to get any of it is in a philosophy class. They won't teach it in the biology class or even in the physics class. So the only place that will describe to you the implications of quantum physics is in a philosophy class, because it's been left up to us philosophers to define the implications, because the scientists don't want to touch it. So yes, we've had a lot in common there, but linguistically, that it doesn't have much to do with the linguistics of it all.
Are we even asking the right questions, guys? Because so much of this is, and it's indicative of knowing what we're dealing with here. We don't really know what we're dealing. So how do we ask the right questions? Do you guys find yourself, I don't know, in debate with your own conscious mind about how to deal with this and how to approach it differently?
That in itself is a good question.
Good. I probably heard it from Ron, but
The answer is then, Scott.
Yeah. But I mean, it has to go further than just understanding morpheme streams and phonemes. I mean, the fact is that we have a culture here. Would you agree, Scott, that there's a culture present within that language? That culture,
yes, culture. The definition of culture is that you have something, some talent, some practice that you pass on to the next generation. That is the definition of culture. And I've been challenged by, again, academics saying that, well, if they're so smart, if they have language, then why don't they have culture? I said, they do. They have language. Language itself is indicative of culture, because what these other academics are talking about is, well, why don't they make fire? Why don't they build houses? Why don't they? They're talking about material culture. But there's so much of what humans do, and
humans are screwing this earth up. These things aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's so much to culture other than just, physical culture, material culture. Mm-hmm. That's what these guys mean by culture. Mm-hmm. But no, language itself is culture. Absolutely, they have culture.
If they are, if they are interdimensional, which I believe them to be because of their frequency they can reach, I think, and that's often a woo-woo camp. Sorry about that, folks, but that's quantum physics. You can change the mass to energy through frequency vibration. Get into that stuff, and that's why you're not going to see a fire. They don't need a fire. They don't need a car to get around. They don't need anything we got. People used to say, "Well, we got to protect them. Let's shoot one so we can protect them." That's ridiculous. That's the stupidest thing. You know, I've never been into that. And I think we weren't into that when we was up there unless we had to protect ourselves. That's the only reason we carried the guns, because of other elements too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things up there can get caught up in the Sierra area there. It's just, I mean, I've got a hat band made out of a 52-inch rattlesnake we shot on the trail. That'll get your attention. Anyway, it's just, well, where was I going with all that? I don't know. But
well, let me ask you this, Ron, regarding the 40 plus years of you looking into this, and Scott, are there any examples of a language existing in a culture that doesn't have religion? And if so, can we speculate about spirituality? I use the word religion, but spirituality, let's stick with that. I would think that every language would have, a culture would have some kind of spiritual core, believe in something greater than themselves. Has that question been asked?
Ron, may I answer that quickly, and then that you take that?
Okay.
We know that human beings have had language for at least, most linguists will say, at least 150,000 years. Spoken language the way we speak it now. Of course, it took much longer to come up with the written language and things like that. But I believe that we've had, in fact, there's archaeological evidence that we've had religion for even longer than that, because there's evidence that the Neanderthals had been buried with some ritual, that Lucy had been buried with some ritual. That's going back a couple million years, right? But certainly, I believe, and there's a lot of evidence that I've read, published, that will state that we have had religion ever since we were able to ask the questions. Ever since we had language, certainly we began. As soon as we had the ability to ask the questions, we began asking the questions. How did all this happen? Who made this? It's got to be a natural thing for us. So I personally believe that yes, once we become sapient or sentient, we began asking the questions, and we adopted religion, or at least spirituality, as Ron would say. Ron?
Well, I think we're all spiritual. We're all energy. I said this earlier, at the most minute part of our existence, we're energy vibrating at different frequencies. That energy can't die, it passes on. That's true with any animal, any body. We are unique in the fact that we are humans, and we're made in the image of, okay, I'm going to say it, God, whatever that is. But I think the troglodytes did evolve, like Darwinism says. So it does not explain our consciousness. It does not explain telekinesis, not explain some of the attributes that we seem to have that Bigfoot might have. He's a little bit more advanced than we are. Some of that may be evolved. Some of it may just be inherited by their creator, whoever did that. But there's a bigger picture to all this stuff. And spirituality, yes, these things, if they can go from the third dimension and exist in the fifth dimension, they're not involved in time like we are, unless they're in our three-dimensional environment. Then they're subject to our three-dimensional rules and laws. They can be shot, things can happen to them, but they can also change their frequency vibration to go out of our perception into the fifth dimension. You see them sometimes cloaking in the plasma field of the fourth dimension of time. That's where the ghosts are seen. That's where a lot of things are seen. Depends on the temperature. That's why a lot of things happen during the witching hour of nighttime, because that's when the resonance of the earth changes. That's when we change. That's when things can happen. Spirituality, yes, they are spiritual beings just like we are.
Okay, real quick here, Ron, regarding proof, scientific proof. What do you think of scientific proof of actually bringing in a body of a being? Where are you at with that?
I don't think it's going to happen unless it happens by accident. But even when it does, supposedly, like Glenn Beck did, he shot one point blank at their Mount St. Helens in 1924, supposedly. They never could get the body. A lot of people say they've shot him. They don't ever find a body. I'm not sure it's ever going to happen, because if they are what I think they could be, and that's, interdimensional, they have an attribute that we got to get a hold of and understand it. I don't think you're ever going to prove it by a body on it, or you could if you had a body on a table. If that happens, great. There could be some that are just really hominids that have been here for eons and evolved way past what I think we are right now. But there's also what I call the dilution factor, where some of them crossbred with natives, indigenous people, and they have diluted themselves down into more human-like qualities, which means they're more human-like than others. What we dealt with up in the Sierra Nevadas, I think we're not diluted down. These things we're just different.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that all of them can talk. I just don't think they're all the same. They're not of the same genome even. Because if you believe in aliens, like I do, like get your head in the sand if you don't think there's aliens out there, if you don't think they've been visiting this Earth is a jewel. We've got everything here. We should be very happy that we've been given dominion on this Earth. That's why they don't mess with us. We are very chosen. We're very special people. So there's Sunday again, Toby, so forgive me. There you go. We're very special people. We just don't realize. If you realize who you are, and don't bring the darkness in. If you don't want, some people are the devil, or they demonic, something like that, don't even go there. Keep your conscious level up to a higher vibration. Think of positive things and advance this world, advance yourself. Get better.
Real quick here to the audience, with our last 10 minutes here, if you'd like to come on the air, don't be shy, come on the air, and all you got to do is raise your hand in the Q&A area, and I can flip on your microphone if you want to. You can speak directly with the presenters here. While people are mulling that over there, Scott, I remember a specific phrase that you mentioned back in 2010. I believe the phrase was "Wicca save us," not "Wicca save us we," but oh gosh, there was a phrase that I think you elicited from the Sierra Sounds. "Food haivwaya," that was it. Food haivwaya, and it had what you're calling, what is it when you utilize a word that's the same between another language and
cognate, a cognatic expression.
So would food be the cognate and haivwaya be the Squatchanese?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because the morpheme, what lay people would call a syllable or a word, we can't call any of them words, because words are notoriously difficult to define. You have to have a dictionary to say, oh, that's an actual word. So we have to call them morphemes. The word or the morpheme food was one that was articulated twice in the same utterance exchange in the Berry tape, and then once in the Morehead tape. The one in the Berry tape was when it seemed like the big male and the big female were arguing, and the female said this is how I have it transcribed, and it's very clear. She goes, "Me watch food, plain food." And if you have to be careful with this, but you have to document it as well. That is a very good pidgin, meaning half English. That is a very good pidgin for, I'm watching the food and there's plenty of it. And then again, 2 years later, same place. Oh, and by the way, when the Berry tapes were recorded, the humans had never said the word food, not once. They were using the word dinner. They were saying, "Hey, Big E, come down, get some dinner." They never said the word food once, yet this creature says it twice in one utterance. Mm-hmm. Then in the Morehead tape, you have it, one of them saying very clearly, and you can tell he's talking to Ron. He says, Food, which phonetically is a perfect pidgin for do you have food? Food, or food have ya? They could have been trying to say, food have you? Or do you know?
We was cooking food at that time for dinner. Had it on the stove.
Yeah, see, I know that. You have to collect all of those elements at the same time to understand what's going on.
Hey, I'm going to bring on Jay, since he was the first in, and he's like the Marine Corps, first in, last to leave. He wants to talk to you guys here. So, Jay, you're up. Can you hear us, Jay? Let me. I think you might be on mute. So.
There he is.
Okay, there I am.
There you are. Go ahead, Jay.
How's it going, guys?
Very well.
Good to see you, Jay. Hear you.
You guys can see me?
No, we can just see your name.
You can just see the name. Good. Oh, there, Jay Bachoshin. That's how you say the name. Hey, I just wanted to thank both of you guys, both Ron and Scott. I've learned a lot because I've been listening to the Sierra Sounds for a long time. And Scott, I thought you could almost imitate those things perfectly. It was really good. But I just wanted to thank you very much. It was very educational. And I definitely appreciate your guys' time today of doing this.
Thank you, Jay. And he's got a film, Finding Jay. Anybody wants to see how research is. Finding Jay is a good thing to see. Well, you get it on Amazon Prime.
I appreciate that, Ron. I really do.
I'm sorry, I still haven't seen the end of it, but I got to get to that point now where I see that smoke is looking like smoke going through there. I don't know if it's a campfire you had or if it's something else, but.
I can tell you that I did not have a campfire going, but when you get to it, look at the timestamp.
I will.
And then,
I just got to go through it again. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and definitely let me know. I know, like I told you before, it's a 2-hour documentary, but you think that's long. Before the cutting room floor happened, it was longer than Avengers Endgame, and it was like close to 3 hours. So I cut it down the best I could. And I appreciate you watching that and, and getting your opinion on that, because it's really important that I put the documentary out for the truth, and that's it. And you put anything on Amazon Prime, you're not going to buy an island anytime soon, and that's okay, because I'm not about that. I'm about the truth and the things that I have discovered in the Kettle Moraine here in Wisconsin. I'm telling you, Ron, that's why just getting your book, the Quantum Bigfoot, is one of my favorite books, because I saw this shimmer out there, but I don't know what it is. I'm still like everybody else, just learning this and, just getting your guys' opinion. I've never really heard the vocals like you have out there and or what Scott has said to send in. I do have like 52 seconds of what sounds like, I don't know, like 30 coyotes, like a convoy going through. That sounds very odd. And Scott, you were saying that.
Well, that's exactly what it sounds like to the non-expert ear. If you have that on tape,
I do.
Then that would be worth listening to, especially if it's good, clear,
yep,
loud enough to put on a transcription program. I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, well, definitely. I will definitely get that over to you, because here's what happened. I went out with my nephew, who was more into aliens than he was Bigfoot, but you know what? We took him out anyway. And he got the idea of doing like a 10-minute meditation while we're out there. I kind of felt funny about that because, I just, that's just not my nature to do, but I thought I would try. And it's really bizarre because I don't know if I was hearing my own thoughts when I was doing that or if it was really them. I mean, just to give you an example, I was just asking a question in my head. I'm here. How many are you? And in my own voice, I heard, we are many. And it was weird that that type of answer came back. But this was about 30 seconds into the meditation, maybe a minute before all the coyotes just went crazy. I mean, it sounded like they were right next to us. And yeah, it was kind of a hair-raising moment. But yeah, I do have that, and I could definitely give that to Ron.
It will be easy to tell if it's really coyotes or it could be Sasquatch sounding like coyotes. But it will be easy to tell if there's any language in it.
Yeah, exactly. Because in the middle of it, when you usually hear them yipping, there was this really weird, quick, I don't know. You know, again, I'm not an Outback Jack. I'm not an animal expert on it. It just sounded odd to me in the middle of it. But I think it's at least worth taking a look at. And just let me know where you want me to send those to, and I'll be more than happy to do that.
Send them to me, Jay.
Okay. He'll forward it to me.
Oh, okay, great. And then what I could do, Ron, maybe could I, because it's a pretty big audio file, should I Google Drive it to you or WeTransfer?
I would go WeTransfer, Jay. That's never let me down.
Okay.
Yeah. And Ron, WeTransfer is just a file sharing option. You'll get an email from him, a data dump, and you'll have to upload it. But it's so flexible that anybody listening who's not using WeTransfer to send all of your big audio files, you're missing out. It's super simple. And Scott, I would recommend it to you as well. WeTransfer.com. No membership, nothing like that. Huge files. I mean, thousands of gigabytes.
I put my IT guy in charge of all of that.
Okay.
Well, that's good. So that's what I would like to do. Like I said, I don't get too much audio or vocalizations out there. Maybe some odd things, but nothing that would resemble anything captured in 2016 in the Kettle Moraine. There was one point where it sounded way off into the distance, and I wasn't able to record it, but it sounded like two Russian guys in a conversation. But it wasn't as loud as the Sierra sounds, obviously, but it was, I was like, who is out here having a conversation, you know? So, yeah, I'll definitely get these to you, Ron.
Yeah, if it sounds like two Russian guys, I'd like to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it seemed like it was so far out into the distance that I and I use an H1 Zoom for my audio device, and I keep it right on my vest, try to get the best sound I can.
By the way, to everyone, I can't, I don't accept anything that has been altered in any way or cleaned up, as they say.
Right, like
don't clean anything up before you send it to me.
Gotcha. Yep. I'll send you the actual audio file to Ron, and then you guys can. And again, I honestly, to me, I think they're coyotes, right? But I'm saying under the circumstances of what we were doing right then and there, doing that kind of that meditation. I don't know. Is it just an absolute coincidence? I don't know, but it's worth it. As soon as you said different sounds of coyotes, that sparked it. And I thought, hey, I'll send it over to you guys. If it's coyotes, it's coyotes. If it's not, then we go to the next step.
Cool.
All right. Thank you again, Jay.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for this. I mean, I didn't mean to take up all the time. I don't know who else has questions or whatnot, but Ron, I love you, man, and you are a great guy. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate that.
Thank you, man.
You're welcome. All right. Talk to you guys later.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks.
Well, unfortunately, we're at our hour here. We're coming to a close. Ron Morehead, thank you again for providing an afternoon for all your fans. Scott, thank you for providing an afternoon for all your fans. I think that something's going to erupt out of this before, I knew that the Sasquatch language conversation had kind of fallen short, way more short than I was hoping for, but I really want to help reawaken this. So my question to you, Scott, is before you leave, is we need to get the language paper back out on the internet in a form to where people are looking at it again and diving in. Is that something that I can post and start advertising more?
Which one?
Well, your paper that you put out, Sasquatch Phonetic Alphabet.
You can put it out there. It's on Ron's.
Mm-hmm.
It's also on Dave Paulides' website. It's out there. but again, it needs to be revised again. But by
Okay.
all means, it's public domain. I
Okay.
didn't publish it to get any kind of academic notoriety or anything. I'm just doing this because I don't know if there's anybody else out there willing to do it. And
Okay.
that's it.
All right. And again, this video will be available. I'm going to give Ron a copy of it. It's going to be up on my website. I'll give a copy to you too, Scott. It'll be a little harder to get to you, but if you want it, it'll be available. I think there's a lot of good information here. And any last words from you two?
Thank you, Toby.
Yeah.
Thank you, Toby. You're a good man.
All right, Charlie Brown.
All right, you heard it from Ron Morehead. I am a good man. There is no changing your opinion of me from here on out. So no matter what you've heard, it has been written in stone. Okay, thanks guys for doing all that. I was blown away. We could have gone for 4 or 5 hours. We did 3 hours solid, and here it is, all on the record. So no going back now. And again, that is the Sasquatch phonetic alphabet. Be on the lookout for it. I am going to be posting it up like crazy. And hey, if you think you can add to it, you can do better. There's some revision that you see with whatever expertise you have. Let me know. Let Scott know. Let Ron know. Let's add to it. Right now, Ron's the one. He's the guy that's holding the mantle here for the sounds. And I think that could change quickly with just an email. The next bit of business we need to get to is regarding YouTube and how to get you more involved with it. Well, first of all, I need to take ownership of the fact that content has been lacking somewhat. For the most part, it's a place for archive podcasts to stream. But I want to put more live content up there, content and contact. And the best way to do it is to involve you. So what if we have you choose an adventure with me? Something I'm calling strange browses. And on these strange browses that I will be taking, you'll be able to vote on where I go. There'll be one of two locations, at least once a month, where you're going to send me. And in these locations, you'll be able to decide what I bring along. It's sounding more and more like a video game, isn't it? That's the point. I'll be your avatar at least for 30 minutes, maybe 60 minutes, in these darkened locations, rolling audio, rolling film, one of the two, and then we'll air it. I'm telling you, the places that we're looking at right now, as far as names are concerned, I don't want to give too much away. One has the name Starvation in it, and I've spoken a little bit about a place with the name Starvation in it. So we're going to a cemetery associated with the word starvation. Can you imagine what kind of headstones exist there? It's an off-trail cemetery that nobody really knows about. So that's the first one. And the second place that you could possibly send me is deep in the woods, real deep in the woods, at a place called Sorcerer's Hollow. So one of those two locations, and there'll be a poll. You can vote, and whoever gets the most votes, whatever location gets the most votes, whatever items get the most votes to bring along with me will be how we do this. Film, audio, gear, tech gadgets, those kind of things, activities that I do in there. There'll all be something that we can vote on together. And a date will be decided upon, a location will be decided upon, and rain or shine at the witching hour, which in my case, it's going to be after 11 o'clock, okay? I'm not going to go. I hope I don't have to go in at 3 in the morning, but if I have to, maybe that'll be part of it. So, I guess this tells you what I am willing to do to get you to subscribe, and I hope you do it. Strange Brow Radio. Type that into YouTube, subscribe, share it. The first episode, the first polling is going to be hopefully before the 3rd of May. And from there on, once a month, we'll be doing this. And if I can get Alex Whitcomb, are you listening? There's some crazy places we could send you. So these are all legal locations, by the way. Even in quarantine, do not report me. I'm doing nothing illegal. Come on. Relax, people. Relax. Thanks for listening, subscribing, all that good stuff, and I will see you in the trees.